Okay, we are live. Hello, Brian. Hello, chat room. Excited for another week of Keeping Karlsson. One of the last episodes of the season, Brian. It's all winding down.
Wow, how quickly the time flies.
I guess. Is that how you feel? Or do you feel like how quickly the time flies, or do you feel like, oh man, it feels like the season's gone on forever?
No, it feels like a grind for sure. It's been a rough season for me particularly. So I'm usually about exhausted by this time of year. It doesn't feel like it went fast, but like it's a reward. It can be a very rewarding time. How do you feel?
Yeah, a little bit of both. It is kind of weird that it's over. It's also, I guess for us, it's weird because it's like not only another season of Keeping Karlsson almost in the books, but also like another year of like playing intense fantasy hockey. Like I've been in 3 different leagues. Yeah, like I really hope I win the 2 leagues that I'm still left in, and if I don't, I'll probably go through a little minor depression of like, wow, I just spent a whole year just to lose. But at least we have I think a good season of Keeping Karlsson under our belts.
I'd like to think so.
It was fun. So we've got Rob in the chat room going to the Boras semis. We've got Dave going to the Sweden semis. We've got a contingent of smart people here, so we'll try to give you guys something useful. I feel like sometimes when you have really smart people in the chat room, it's almost like you guys don't even need our advice, right? But okay, I just got a message. Was it from you, Brian? No, it's from. Okay. 1 sec, actually. Or no, okay, I'll respond to that later. Okay, let's start.
No, just go ahead. But just tell us why.
It's actually, I'm booking a vacation. Dina just messaged me saying that her boss gave her the okay. So I think we're gonna do it. We're gonna go to Costa Rica.
Wow.
At the end of April.
Wow.
So yeah.
Is this like your 4th vacation this year?
No, it's our first vacation this year. When do you count as this year? From January?
I guess that's fair. In the last 12 months.
I don't know. I'll have to get back to you here. Maybe this isn't the best content. Why don't we start the show? Let's start the show here. But yeah, if anyone has any Costa Rica tips, please tweet at us at Keeping Karlsson or message on the Facebook. I'd love to hear it. Okay, we're going to San Jose. And I got my Sharks hat ready to go, so I wonder if they'll get the reference while I'm there. Okay, here we go.
Why?
I'm going to San Jose, Costa Rica.
Oh.
And I'm wearing a Sharks hat. Come on, Brian.
That's where the Sharks play.
Oh, man. We need to start recording these shows in the morning because I feel like you're like so tired now. And I got these zingers coming all episode long.
I'm ready to. I can turn it on when it counts.
I already caught you in the notes in a really bad lie, but I removed it. So we're okay. Or a mistake. Sorry, a bad mistake. But,
it was an error.
Yeah. Okay. Here we go. Yeah! Yes! Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Keeping Karlsson Fantasy Hockey Podcast, the best fantasy hockey podcast in the world, hosted by 2 guys on Eric Karlsson in their keeper pools. Not that he's helped that much this year. But regardless, I am very excited for this week's episode. I am Elon Dubrovsky, the host of the show, and with me is my co-host and the fantasy hockey robot and the one who knows all the ins and outs of fantasy stats and advanced stats and ins and outs and what have yous. Brian Calm, let's do this.
I especially specialize in the what have yous of fantasy hockey. That's where I really shine. Elon, I'm pumped to go. You're wearing a hat tonight. I'm wearing a hat tonight. If you, dear listener, are wearing a hat, then we've got a little Keeping Karlsson hat trick right there, doing our own Brendan Perlini and Vinny Hinostroza impressions.
Oh, okay. Well, I don't know if they were wearing the hats, but I get what you were saying. I love the intro, Brian. What is your hat? You got a B on there, but I think that's not a Bruins hat, right?
No, it's a B stylized like the O for the Ottawa Senators. So it's the first letter of my name, of course, but it's also for the Belleville Senators. But it's more for Brian, just like custom made Senator styling.
That's cute. I was actually thinking of getting a hat for my wife, Dina, and I was thinking we should get her a Dallas Stars hat with like a big D on it, and it could be like the same idea. That's a fun little trick to get someone to wear a hockey hat when maybe they don't give a shit about hockey. But okay, Brian, let's get going. Whoa.
There goes our clean rating.
There we go. Drop the S-bomb. Hey, you know what? Everything's changed now. We just got a 1-star review on iTunes, so I'm just like letting it all go. But okay, we got a big show today. We got a lot to get to. Only, I think, 3 weeks left in the season. A lot of people going into either their finals next week or maybe their semifinals, depending on your league format. And we're going to, again, be taking lots of looks at the schedule, trying to see who's worth holding, who's worth dropping. I've got a lot of players who are like high-end players that have been on cold streaks, but actually just heated up recently, which I think is an interesting thing to go over. Like, Like, do we trust that they just, like, a guy who like was pointless in 5 finally got a goal yesterday? Does that mean we could trust him to keep it going or not? So Brian's going to dig into all the, underlying numbers to figure it out. Before we get going, of course, DobberHockey.com, right? We're presented by them. It's the best fantasy hockey website out there. It's such a treat to be able to say every week that we're presented by this fantastic site. I check it out every day for the articles and plus all the tools. I'm just always there looking at the starting goalies and the line combinations. Brian's laughing, I'm assuming because of something going on in the chat room here. But yeah, Dobber Hockey.
It's just that you check out Dobber Hockey for the same reasons you check out Playboy.
Wait, what? What's that?
For the articles.
Oh, okay. Very good. I mean, no one knows what's in your head. You're just laughing. People might think that you're like laughing. He checks out Dobber Hockey? What a loser. But no, where else would you go? Because like I said, it's the premier site out there for fantasy hockey news and notes and stats and tools. Okay, Brian, let's get going. Like I said, I want to get into some of these like cold streaks. The thing is, behind the scenes here for Keeping Karlsson, every week when I'm prepping the show, the way we do, I don't like sit down Sunday morning and start thinking about what are we going to talk about this week. I sort of all throughout the week, I'm keeping little buckets of, injuries and outjuries and hot streaks and cold streaks. Whenever I think of a player, someone asks us on Twitter or on Facebook about a player. And if I think it might be interesting to talk about, I'll throw them in my bucket. And then on Sunday, I'll put it together. And all the players I had in my cold streak bucket had actually done well, finally, just yesterday or on Friday. So then I was thinking, should we not talk about these guys? But I thought, like I said, let's talk about them, see what we're going to do here. So let's start with an easy one. Over in San Jose, Brent Burns went pointless for 4 straight games. We had a question, I think it was from Zach or someone in our Facebook group was like, should I sit Burns for Saturday's game? And it just seemed so obvious. Like, no, you can never sit Burns. But again, 4 pointless games in a row, that's not great. Like, you went into your potential like playoff semifinals and maybe lost because Brent Burns didn't do anything for you. He finally did pick up an assist yesterday on Joe Thornton's goal in the 4-2 loss to Nashville. But yeah, not a great week. But Brian, what can we do moving forward? And also just in general, it's a nice time to talk about Brent Burns because even with that cold stretch, he's a 34-year-old dude and he's got 74 points in 72 games now. He's having a career year. His career high is 76 points. It's just 2 points away from it. And he's still got 10 games to go. Of course, like I said, that didn't help the people last week, but overall, like, there's nothing to say, right? Like, Brent Burns is fine. He's probably the best defenseman that you can own in fantasy right now. It was just a bad luck stretch. Nothing to worry about, right? Maybe just like the long season taking a toll on someone.
Yeah, this one's a slam dunk. Don't worry about Brent Burns. I mean, yes, you always have to wonder. He's 34 years old, so his durability has to be in the back of your mind if you're an owner, especially if you see some of the points disappearing. What's incredible for him is that he's still playing 25 minutes a night, so maybe that wears on Brent Burns to some extent, but actually, I thought the question was going to be, Elon, how has Brent Burns managed to have a career year as a 34-year-old? I think that's the real headline here. Not that he was cold for 4 games, but that he is set. He's on a career high point pace. And it's really a curious question as to whether Brent Burns has like found another gear or has been getting more luck than he's used to. And the short answer is that at 5-on-5, Burns has declined somewhat in his individual play. He's putting fewer shots towards the net, has his lowest expected goals rate since breaking out as a high-end blue line option in 2013-14. But to wash that out, Brent Burns has never been surrounded by a more complete, capable, and offensively dangerous set of players before in his career. So while Burns' own shot-taking and goal-scoring has slipped, he's had so many more goals scored while he's been on the ice to get in on. He's been on the ice already for 74 goals at 5-on-5 this year, and that's just one less than his career high of being on the ice for 75 goals for at 5-on-5. So you combine that with him also putting up the second highest rate of secondary assists in his career, and kablamo, you've got a career year for 34-year-old Brent Burns. So, I mean, obviously the next question is, can he do this again? I think you need to get used to, or even like over the next 10 games, get used to the idea of Brent Burns being limited to like 10 or 15 goals rather than entering the 20 goal range and approaching the 30 goal range as he has done in recent years. This is like a little almanac preview here. So expect less goal scoring from expect less goal scoring from Brent Burns going forward, and then whether he can keep approaching 70 points on the whole going forward. There's a lot to watch in San Jose this offseason. We know that Karlsson is a UFA, but so is Joe Pavelski, so is Joe Thornton, so is Jonas Donskoy, Kevin Labanc, Timo Meier, both restricted free agents. So whether or not this group can stay together is going to determine just how dangerous Burns' team can remain while he's on the ice next year. But his value is sky high right now, even with that little power outage. And mad props, as the kids say, to Brent Burns for having a career year at age 34. Wow.
Yeah, he's amazing. I guess that makes sense. But you're saying like maybe next year he'll approach 70. This year, like I said, he's approaching above 80 points. So we'll have to see what happens moving forward. It is interesting because a lot of people who listen to the show are in keeper leagues. And I feel like someone like Brent Burns is going to have such low value because people love to think long term. But once again, Brent Burns, one of the top fantasy options out there, especially because the value over replacement for defensemen, it's so hard to find a defenseman who could give you all of the things, like all the shots, all the points that power play points that Brent Burns gives you. It's so hard to match. So yeah, going into next year, I feel like if you're in a deep keeper league and you could get him for cheap because people want to have the younger, hotter options, like just get him every year. Because I feel like even if he gradually decreases, I feel like someone like him, he's not just going to fall off a cliff unless, like you say, San Jose just loses all their talent. But I have a feeling that this is a team that's going to keep trying to go for it. Yeah, like he's not going to fall off a cliff. So maybe like this year he gets 80 points. Next year, maybe he gets like 70, 75. Maybe after that, he gets like 65. Even like a 60-point defenseman is super valuable in fantasy. So I feel like you still have many years of a valuable Brent Burns, unless you'll tell me that you think he's just going to one day like go from like 60 points one year to like 30 points the next.
That's not likely to happen, but it is funny because I'm thinking long-term sell high. If you can sell him as a 75-plus point guy and get that kind of return back in a keeper league, which of course is going to be hard because everybody knows how old Brent Burns is, but I would do that. Elon, you're saying maybe he's still gettable for very good value if someone is thinking that he is old and busted and this is their last chance to recoup assets for him. So we're in this funny situation. I am very curious if you are involved in a Brent Burns trade in a keeper league this offseason, let us know. I'd be really curious to see how those are going down.
And like you said, Brian, San Jose is scoring all these goals, which means there's other defensemen getting in on them. Like there's no Erik Karlsson right now to get in on them. And so we've been talking about Marc-Edouard Vlasic and Tim Heed getting points. When I say we've been talking about them, I mean like the overall community, because all of a sudden these are two players getting a lot of points lately. Vlasic is up to 6 points in his last 4 games. I'm curious if you see anything there that looks sustainable. Tim Heed, he was getting healthy scratched most of the season, but he's now played in 9 straight games. I'd imagine Karlsson being out of the lineup helps. And he's got 6 points in the 9 games that he's played recently. So these are two guys getting in on all of these Sharks goals. I guess there's always 2 defensemen on the ice, right? And so it makes sense that these guys, as the ones maybe the most offensively minded ones after Burns, makes sense that they're going to get points. Do you think that these are good guys to stream in leagues when people need defense?
Sort of, like just by virtue of the fact that they're on such a high scoring team, but I'm not seeing anything terribly sustainable from Vlasic or Tim Heed, or as I think our Swedish friends have told us, it's pronounced Tim Head. Anyway, Vlasic did just recently start playing with Tim, I'll call him Heed, recently after pretty much playing a full year alongside Justin Braun. And then so I checked, well, is Vlasic doing more with Heed than he was without Heed? And the answer is no. It's about the same as what Vlasic was doing with Justin Braun, except that Vlasic and Heed have an on-ice shooting percentage of 21% when they're playing together, which is why they're being able to collect these points, and also which is why it's not going to continue for either one of these guys in terms of putting points on the board. Not someone I'm very excited to stream. I think you've got some more interesting streaming candidates coming later in the show on the blue line.
Yeah. Okay. So so for people curious what's going to be happening here, we're going to go through some more of these players who were in cold streaks, and then we're going to end the show with a huge slew of interesting, probably available players on hot streaks with forwards and defensemen. So stay tuned for that. And right now, Brian is saying Vlasic or Tim Head are at the bottom of his list, even though they're the only ones we brought up so far. Okay, let's go now to Buffalo. It's a really tough situation, I think, for people owning Sabres players, with the Sabres playing only Wednesday and Saturday next week. I know Dave Betton, who's in the chat room right now, was on the show last week, did an amazing job. He would say that's all that matters next week. But I will just point out that Buffalo does play 5 games the following week. So if you can somehow make it past next week, we're going to be having a totally different conversation. But you got to get through an elimination playoff round to get there. And there's a lot of players who have been slumping big time lately. Like Sam Reinhart, he ended a 6-game pointless streak yesterday with an assist on a Jeff Skinner first period goal, but then nothing today in the 4-3 shootout win over St. Louis. And Jeff Skinner, rather, that goal that he scored yesterday, that ended a 4-game pointless streak for him. And he had no points today either. We also have Rasmus Dahlin, who's been quarterbacking the top power play, like getting great deployment, but his assist today was his first in 9 games. He had an 8-game pointless streak going into today. So Aside from Jack Eichel, who, by the way, came back from his suspension to play both games on the weekend, took a lot of shots in both of these games, but no points for him. Like, what do you do if you own like any Sabres player? And by the way, that includes the goalies, who at this point, it seems like Hutton and Ullmark just keep on taking turns and none of them are playing that well to earn the job. So I feel like there's a question. It's reasonable to ask, like, do you drop every single Sabre, I guess, except for Jack Eichel going into next week if you're wanting to be competitive? And because, Wednesday, Saturday schedule, Saturday you're full anyways, so you'll be able to play someone else in that spot, and like probably you have better options than someone like Sam Reinhart, maybe even Jeff Skinner with how cold they've been. So we're really talking like you lose one game by dropping one of these guys. You could drop him for someone playing like 4 times.
Right. So a lot of this depends on schedule. And if that's true for you, if you can gain 3 games played net and downgrade your player a little bit, then that can often work out for you, right? Especially if you're looking at guys like Skinner and Reinhardt and Ristolainen and Dahlin, who have night in, night out not been reliable producers lately. In fact, no one in Buffalo has. In the last month, the Sabres have just 31 goals over 15 games. They're shooting barely 6% as a team in that span, which is unsustainably low. Of course, it's hard to think that the absence of Eichel didn't profoundly affect the Sabres during this stretch, particularly while they were shut out for 3 straight games. 2 of those games were at home. So, I took a look at the numbers beneath those goal totals, and I wouldn't say that this has actually been the Sabres' worst hockey of the season in this stretch, but I would say, perhaps insultingly to Sabres fans, that this is just kind of Sabres hockey. They're not a great team, so you need to keep your expectations reasonable, but they're also not as bad as it looks on the score sheet. So it's sort of like an underhanded compliment, I guess. Elon, you mentioned how hot Buffalo had been in November.
I didn't, Brian, of course.
Oh, okay.
I know that. One sec.
No, I got it.
Okay, maybe go back to that part again.
Yeah.
I could.
No, it's okay. I knew you hadn't. Sorry. Elon, you might mention how hot the Sabres were in November and why they're not the same team now as they were then, but that was pretty much built on a wave of positive PDO. So I'm not making any decisions, or I didn't make any decisions about them based on that, say, month-long run. If you're asking me what to do now with the Sabres, who hopefully will start putting some goals on the board again, I'd still want to hold, if I'm getting, like, if it's 4 games of someone who is a step down from Skinner, Reinhardt, Ristolainen, and Dahlin versus 1 game of those guys, sure, I'll make that swap. But if I'm getting a reason, like if I'm only going to gain 1 game by swapping these guys out for someone lesser, I would much rather have these Sabres still in my lineup, like Skinner, Reinhardt, Risto, and Dahlin. Like, I don't believe their disappearance from the score sheet is going to be permanent, but you also do have to consider, I guess, if you want to look at the flip side, Elon, that Buffalo is maybe a pretty demoralized group at this point. Maybe you worry that they're mentally checking out, but they do have a 5-game week coming up after this one. So also keep that in mind, especially if you're in a league with 2-week playoff matchups and it covers this 2-week span. If you maybe sacrifice a game from these guys this week, you'll get 5 next week.
Yeah, but Brian, come on. Like, okay, Sam Reinhart, at least. This guy not only had this low point streak, he's got like 0 and 1 shots in like each of these games. How can you justify holding this? Like, I would be talking about dropping him even if he had a 3-game week this week. Like, I know that I will sort of lump them in together in this question, but I assumed you would at least say drop Reinhart, like, for sure at this point. Like, I can't in good conscience.
Like
you're going to tell some...
He's a 70-point player this year. He's on a 68-point pace, 59 points in 71 games. And that's with this recent outage. Like, yes, Buffalo was significantly struggling lately. I don't think it's going to last.
I do think that a lot of these points that Reinhardt put up to get him to the 70-point pace were during this PDO surge that they had in November, which, by the way, for those that don't know what we're talking about, PDO is like high percentages, both save percentage and shooting percentage. That's wrong. Okay, so you think Reinhardt is going to bounce back and he's worth holding on to, even if he maybe is like not going to play a lot next week? Well, he for sure won't. And you think he's going to bounce back and be worth holding for the rest of the season? I'd be willing to bet you that he's going to be a guy that you'll suggest dropping come a couple weeks from now.
Okay, I'll take that. Will you change your mind if I tell you that since the start of December up until just before this cold stretch, which, yes, has been a very sad 2 weeks, he was a point per game player, 37 points in 37 games, 88 shots?
Hey, man, that's a long time. That's ancient history to me. Like, this is the playoffs. I feel like I always thought that our philosophy was come to fantasy playoffs, you got to be ruthless. You got to drop players that
For
aren't performing.
sure.
And like, unless you're going to tell me that Sam Reinhart should be getting points and isn't, like the types of things that I look for to see
He
that.
should be getting points and isn't.
But he's not taking any shots. You're the one who's always talking about how shots on goal is like your big indicator to tell if a player should be doing well. He used to take decent numbers of shots on goal. Today, 0 shots. The previous 2 games, 1 each, then 0 before that. Like when he was getting all these points, I'm seeing 4, 3, 5 shots. I'm not holding on to a guy who's taking 0 or 1 shots per game. He's not even helping you in another category if he doesn't get you a point. Plus, if your league counts plus minus, he hasn't gotten a plus game since March 1st. He's been minus or 0 every single game. Sucks.
Well, only clown leagues are counting plus minus. Am I right?
I feel like only clown leagues will have Sam Reinhart rostered next week. But okay, let's move on to another player who was doing nothing, but actually now is doing something. So Zach Parise was pointless in 4 games, and not only that, he was like not even taking shots. Also, again, same like Reinhart, really disturbing to me. Though Parise was especially disturbing because he's a guy who you could generally count on for like a lot of shots. He's been shooting up a storm this season, but he did break that 4-game pointless skid with an assist yesterday, and he has a power play goal so far today versus the Islanders. That game is still going there in the 3rd period. Parise has a power play goal on 2 shots. So maybe he's back. Maybe he's bounced back. I don't know. What do you think? Next week, Minnesota plays Tuesday and then Friday, Saturday. So it would potentially be tempting to drop Parise for someone who plays maybe like Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, like a Tampa Bay Lightning player, rather than getting only 1 game before Friday. What do you think about Parise? Is this just a cold stretch? Is there something wrong with him? Apparently you don't care when players stop taking shots. So I guess you're going to say that he's going to be fine, right?
I care deeply when players stop taking shots. I'm seeing Sam Reinhart. Yes, he has 2 shots over his last 3 games. Eichel wasn't there for 2 of those, and I think that really hurt him. So Eichel's back. Let's give him a couple games to get back on board. But
I guess, yeah, I will say that I told people that, like on our Facebook group, they're like, should I drop Reinhart this week? And I was like, you know what? Hold him for the weekend. Eichel will be back. I'm sure that he'll be fine. They did nothing all weekend, so bye. But anyways,
Zach
okay,
Parise. Yeah, so I'm a little more concerned about the dearth of shots from Zach Parise, and that's because unlike Reinhart, Reinhart is just going back to the situation where he's playing with Eichel and things were going well, whereas Parise does not have that luxury. First, let's zoom out to a team level and look at just the Wild in general, whose season has taken a turn for the worse lately. They've been in goal-scoring funk for pretty much a month, just like the Sabres, thanks to a drop in their team shooting percentage down to 7%. But the thing with Minnesota is that they also did a bunch of weird things with their roster. And I think that's probably like, unlike the Sabres, who are maybe just, the quality of their shots the quantity, unlike the Sabres, who seem to be taking similar quality of shots as always and just cashing in on less of them. I'm not sure that Minnesota can get back to where they were before they did this little roster overhaul that they've done over the last month. And you have to think it's had an impact specifically on Zach Parise, who's had his world turned upside down. And as an example of that, Elon, can you name Zach Parise's 4 most common line mates this season?
Like all season long?
Yeah.
Okay. Zucker. No, probably not. Koivu.
Yes, injured, gone for the season.
Okay, Granlund.
Traded.
Okay, yeah, so this is easy. Niederreiter.
Traded.
Okay, so it's all the player. His most common line mates are all gone, basically?
No, Charlie Coyle also traded, all gone. So the guys that Parise has been playing with and succeeding alongside all season long, gone one after another out the door for whatever reason. Lately, he's been playing with Kevin Fiala and Eric Stahl, and Eric Stahl should be a decent guy to play with, but we know he's had a rough season too. It's almost like the Minnesota is like this isle of misfit toys all of a sudden, where they have a bunch of pieces that don't necessarily fit together anymore the way they were. And I think that really is it doesn't seem, I was reading a little bit about the moves they've made lately, and it seems as though the suggestion was that there wasn't much thought strategically to the impact of bringing in different kinds of players, like the way Kevin Fiala is different from Mikael Granlund, and how that's going to impact what everyone's role is on the team, and how everyone's just trying to figure out, okay, what do I do now? How do I complement one another? And apparently there's rumblings that Bruce Boudreau has not done a very good job of managing that himself. So it's a really rough situation in Minnesota, which doesn't make it any better for Parise owners to deal with it. It's a really terrible time for him to go cold. He's been a gift that's been giving all year in a sustainable way. So we'll see if somehow some chemistry can be recreated between him and any of his former or like longstanding or brand new teammates. But until we see that happen, I'm a little concerned that he's going to be able to produce the way he was for most of the season.
Yeah, it is an interesting situation in Minnesota. Not only with Parise and like Eric Stahl, like you said, who finally had broken out of a cold stretch, and now it looks like he's in another one again. He had a goal yesterday, but before that, he was pointless in 3. I feel bad for Ben from Average Time on Ice, who had Ryan Donato, who was really good when he first got traded, then went cold for a bit, and then he had him on his bench yesterday for a 2-goal game. Hopefully he has him back in his lineup for 2 assists today. Donato's one of these guys that's really tough to call. If he's a free agent, maybe you don't grab him now, but come like Friday, Saturday of next week might be a good guy to grab for 2 games. But yeah, I agree with you, Brian. It's tricky because you don't even know how the lines are going to shake up. Like you even said that Parise was playing with Stahl and Fiala a lot recently. Looks like today Parise's been playing with Stahl and Jason Zucker. So the lines keep on shifting around as Minnesota tries to figure out what they're doing. And hey, right now, tied 2-2. I guess we'll see how this game finishes up. I'll let you guys know before the end because I know people listening to the show always want to get my game updates a day late. Over in Arizona, another guy who was super cold, Alex Galchenyuk broke a 7-game pointless streak yesterday by scoring 2 goals versus the Oilers. Is Alex Galchenyuk back? I guess it's like too strong of a question, right? But like, why was he doing so badly, first of all? And now should we be happy about him? Like, the thing is, Galchenyuk, first of all, we all know the story. He was like a guy who we always expected to have high pedigree in Montreal. I feel like I've said this like a million times to set the scale for talking about Galchenyuk. But also, he is getting good deployment. Like he's, getting a lot of ice time and top power play deployment. And Arizona has a good schedule next week: Monday, Thursday, Saturday, Sunday. So, Monday is as a weekday. Like there's not too many teams playing, so you'll definitely be able to fit him in your lineup if you add him. And then you could also just wait and get him like a Thursday, Saturday, Sunday. So I'm curious to know what's your take on Alex Galchenyuk. And actually, maybe I could get you to compare him to other Coyotes forwards. There's really only one other obvious one, I guess, is Clayton Keller. Like it's weird. Like Arizona's in a playoff spot, and I'm not even sure if it's worth rostering any of their forwards. Like Keller is actually cold himself. He only has 1 assist in his last 4 games. I'd be curious to know if you wanted to grab an Arizona Coyote forward next week, would it be Clayton Keller or Alex Galchenyuk, or are you going to go off the board and say someone like Vinny Hinostroza, who you said you mentioned he had that hat trick last week?
No, I'm not even going to go on the board. I'm going to say I don't really want any Arizona Coyotes. We talked about Buffalo not scoring goals, and that's been a bit of an uncharacteristic funk for them. Same with Minnesota, but Arizona just doesn't score goals. This is a season-long thing. The Coyotes are not a high-octane team. They're 28th in the league in all situations goals for per 60 minutes and 26th in the league in expected goals for per 60 minutes. They don't deserve any better than they've gotten. The Coyotes are winning games with a very stingy defense that is not taking many risks and trying to capitalize on a couple mistakes a game. And the defense is successful. They're allowing the 6th fewest expected goals against per 60 in the league, which of course has benefited our friend Darcy in net. But that's why I'm not that into Galchenyuk or Keller or any Coyotes forward. It's not because I think Galchenyuk and Keller specifically are bad at hockey and scoring. Like I think you put them on a higher pace team and their point totals would be going just fine. And I'd be very excited about the prospect of owning either one of them. But these guys are going to have their output limited by the style Arizona plays. And with the Coyotes also climbing the standings right now, this very conservative playing style is being rewarded. So I wouldn't expect Arizona to change tack anytime soon. So I'm not going to bet on any Arizona Coyote to pick it up more than they have recently. But why not? If you want, you could try one of these guys out on Monday if they're floating around a free agency. Take it from there one game at a time. Also, Galchenyuk and Keller, should they be available in your leagues, could make decent Sunday ads to bring your matchup home. Like they're a decent bet on any given night, but it's not someone that I'm really excited to commit a roster spot to.
And if you had to pick one though, Brian, throw us a name.
Keller.
Okay. By the way, we should mention one guy who is getting points lately is Jacob Chychrun. He had an assist and 6 shots versus Edmonton yesterday, and he was actually healthy scratch the game before, which is strange because he was actually on a good run. He had 7 points his previous 10 games before getting healthy scratch. I imagine it was for some sort of defensive lapse. Like you say, Arizona's depending on this defensive play, so I guess any little mistake, and it's like, get out of here, Jacob Chychrun. But yeah, I guess he got the message. He had this great game yesterday, at least offensively. Like, what do you do with someone like Chychrun? Like, do you have to be worried that potentially he'll get healthy scratched again in a game next week? Or do you think that if you have him, you should be fine, and if not, like he's a pretty decent defenseman to add? Or are you just as concerned about him as everyone else?
Yeah, exactly. I think the difference with Shikrin is you can hope to get some peripheral production from him, and that's about it, though. Like over the last, say, 10 games, you can hope for 4 points out of him. And sure, he's got an okay chance of pointing on any given night, but not any better than a lot of free agents in your pool. I actually had a bid on him uh, before the game he got scratched and was very relieved that I did not end up adding him to my team. I like added someone else in front of him or like whatever. Sorry. I actually had a bid in on Jacob Chikrin ahead of the game. He lost, so I'm really glad that I did not have a scratched player on my roster, but I don't think that's going to be a risk going forward. Elon, what do you think about one guy that we didn't really get into is Vinny Hinostroza? Is he someone you want to add this week? Like, do you prefer him to even someone like Alex Galchenyuk because of his recent production?
No, I don't play that way. I know a lot of
Okay.
people do play that way, and you end up having a lot of players on your roster who did really well the game before you added them all throughout the season. But I like to I'd rather just, even before Galchenyuk had those 2 goals, I would have probably added Galchenyuk before Hinostroza for like yesterday's game, and I would have been rewarded. But of course, I would have also paid the price all those games before when he was doing nothing. Hinostroza was like getting points. Brian, here, let me ask a question to you now. I need help, and actually, I know at least one of our patrons has the exact same question. I've been holding Darcy Kemper all season long, and like with my bye this week in the Cupful, I've been just looking at next week, staring at tomorrow's game against Tampa in the face, trying to decide, am I going to start Darcy Kemper against Tampa Bay tomorrow? I mean, you're saying that Arizona's really good at letting in goals or avoiding letting in shots and goals. And Tampa, of course, though, is very, very good at scoring goals. In the Cupful, even if you only let in, like, let's say, even if you have a bad game, let in, say, 4 goals on 30 shots, that's still fine. Like, that would still give him, like, 2 fantasy points. He wouldn't give me negative. But, of course, if he lets in, like, 5 goals in the first period and then gets pulled, I'll be so sad. What would you do if you were me and this patron who I forget who it was?
It depends on the point of the matchup, right? At the
It's
start of the
Monday.
week.
It's Monday.
Okay.
Tomorrow.
Okay. So specifically in that context, I'll probably play him. Like it's definitely a risky proposition. You've got one of the league's best offensive teams against one of the league's best defensive teams. Something's got to give. But if Kempers helps you get this far, I don't think you would like. You might not get the win. I don't think you should count on that. But you're at least hoping for some decent rate stats.
Yeah, I guess it's the kind of thing in a points league, you could look at the format and see how bad does the game have to be. Like in the Cupful, we're pretty generous. Like unless your goalie really blows it, you're probably not going to get negative points. But there have been a lot of negative points. Like Frederick Anderson owners know a lot about negative points over the past week. I think I'm going to play him. And there, I'm glad that you said that I should, so that if he doesn't play well, I could just blame you. Brian, let's take a break now from all of the fun hockey talk and talk about our sponsor for this week's episode, Brian. Brian. Let's take a break from all the hockey talk very quickly and take a second to thank our sponsor for this week's episode, which are our friends over at SeatGeek. Like I've been saying for the last little while, now is the time to go and watch a game. If you're in a market where your team is fighting for the playoffs, you can go to a game right now, and it's basically like going to a playoff game. Like there's such high stakes, a lot of tight races, both in the Eastern and Western Conference. Now's the time to check out a game, and you can do that with confidence with our friends at SeatGeek. Sometimes getting tickets online can be complicated. You never know where to go, like what site can you trust? You can trust SeatGeek. They put a guarantee on any ticket you buy. They're also going to aggregate a bunch of tickets from a bunch of different places to make sure that you can get the best value for the price that you're willing to pay. I actually really like how on SeatGeek you can sort the tickets by value as opposed to by price. You can do either, and so you can see like, am I getting a good deal? Is it worth it to go to this thing? I also really like just taking out the app, browsing around, seeing what else I could do. If I don't want to go to a hockey game tonight, what's going on in my city? And Brian, I actually used SeatGeek recently. I went to a concert of Robin in Toronto. I didn't actually tell you. I should have, because I know
You didn't tell me.
I didn't tell you. It was last Thursday, I believe, at Rebel in Toronto. It was crazy. I've never been, or it's been a long time since I've been to like a club atmosphere like this, where I have all these like smelly young people bumping into me while I'm just trying to watch Robin do her thing on stage. Anyways, it was an experience, and I was thinking that for today, because I know we've been playing this game recently, of thinking of, I'll tell you, we've been playing this game recently of me bringing up a city and telling you a couple shows going on, and then you could try to guess which ticket would be more expensive on SeatGeek. I was thinking, to honor Robin, I could find, a city in Sweden. I was thinking Stockholm, Sweden. I don't think SeatGeek, though, is running in Sweden. I did find Stockholm, South Dakota, so I guess we can go there. If anyone is listening in South Dakota, you could either go see Cher, which would be pretty fun, right? Like, what are your how many more times do you have to see Cher? Or you could see the wife of former Ottawa Senator Mike Fisher, Carrie Underwood, two probably very hot tickets over in Stockholm, South Dakota. Brian, which one do you think is more expensive on SeatGeek?
I feel like this is a geographically contextual, like you need to take into account where this is happening. And I don't know anything about Stockholm, South Dakota, but if I just had to guess about what I think Stockholm, South Dakota is, I think the more expensive ticket would be Carrie Underwood.
Incorrect. But both
every week.
But both pretty good deals. I share $97 at least. Carrie Underwood 88 plus. So you were close, but it is Cher. Brian, people could even get $10 less off that price just for listening to this show. Why don't you go ahead and tell them how?
Yeah, all you need to do is download the SeatGeek app and enter the promo code KEEPING, and you'll get $10 off your very first SeatGeek purchase. Again, you should try it today. Download the app or go on the website, make an account, enter the promo code KEEPING before you buy your first ticket, and you'll save $10 off that price. SeatGeek, life's an event. They have the tickets.
They do indeed. Okay, Brian, let's get back to some more players on cold streaks before we'll get to all of these hot streak potential free agents that you might want to add. No longer am I going to be talking about players who were cold and then finally had a good game. Now I'm just talking straight up cold, and I got to start in Nashville. I don't even know if anyone still has this guy, but just to make sure, if anyone's holding Matthias Ekholm, it's time to let him go, right? He's pointless in 6, only 1 point in his last 12 games. Nashville plays Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday next week, so it's not even an exciting schedule. I personally don't see any reason to hold on. Brian, you actually totally called it that Ekholm would slow down when we talked about him maybe like a couple of months ago. He was super hot. He was doing so well. I asked you if he would keep it up, and you said, nah, he's probably the same as he was before. So I'd imagine now you're going to say, if I could get into the mind of Brian, I think you're going to say, look, he's not this bad, but he's also not as good as he was before. He's the same 30, 35-point defenseman that he always was. Is that what you're going to say?
That's it. That's all there is to it. If you still own Matthias Ekholm, you are asleep at the wheel. He's a snoozer, and the time to let go was 12 games. Okay, maybe not 12 games ago, but like definitely 10. We said the moment he goes a game without a point, let him go. That happened. So thanks for the softball, Elon, and just reminding everybody that we got that one right.
Okay, and another one you got right, Brian, by the way, Craig Smith. Last week you talked about him on the podcast. Me and Dave were both like, Brian, why are you even talking about this guy? Hey, he got you 2 points in 3 games this past week, so not too shabby. He's still playing with Sissons and Yarncroc. We thought that he'd be playing with Turris and Granlund. Turris has actually been healthy scratched the last couple of games, so that's kind of weird. So who knows what's going on with these Nashville lines? Probably Turris comes back soon. Everything gets thrown through a blender again, but Craig Smith has been on the top power play, and like I said, 2 points in his last 3. So you could do worse, but also, like I said, Nashville plays only Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday next week, so not the most exciting schedule. But if you took Craig Smith because of Brian's advice, I guess you got to hold on until he slows down, because Brian loves Craig Smith, and Craig Smith is making Brian look oh so smart. Do you want to talk about him, or should I move on to the next player?
One of my favorite. I mean, I talk about him all the time. Just one of my favorite streamers. Always a good chance that he'll reward you, even if it seems like there's no way he should.
Yeah. Well, yeah, because Dave was like, who's this guy on the line with? I was like, he was like, what, Sissons and Yarn? Come on. I was like, yeah, well, hey, still got you 2 points playing with Sissons and Yarncroc. So what are you going to do? I doubt we have anything new to say about this next guy, kind of like with Ekholm. But should people be ready to dump Vincent Trocheck at this point? He has just 2 points in his last 8 games. Flirting also flirting. Florida also has a boring Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday schedule next week. Last time we brought Trocheck up, we blamed his lack of top power play time for his fall back to being like a 50-point guy. Like again, we did already talk about him a few weeks ago. He had been cold then, and we said, look, this guy was a 50-point guy for the last few seasons. Before last season, we had this huge breakout, and probably a big reason for that breakout was the fact that he got on the top power play and got so many power play points. Now he's still centering the second line, but he hasn't been playing on the top power play. And yeah, not only is he not doing what he did last year, but right now he's even slumping worse than the 50-point guy he was usually reliable to be. Like I said, 2 points in his last 8 games. What do you think about Vincent Trocheck at this point? I feel like going into next season, we're going to have to take some lessons from Trocheck, because we weren't the only ones. Like, he was super overrated, like all across the board. Everyone was loving Vincent Trocheck, and we fell into this trap as well. And he's definitely let a lot of us down. Like, people were talking about him as like a top fantasy option, especially in bankers leagues with his shots and his hits. People were talking about him as like a top 20 option. He's been a huge letdown.
Huge letdown. And the big issue is that, yeah, Vincent Trocheck is still not on the top power play, which leaves him on what is a decidedly unimpressive second power play unit. Not to say that he's been great at 5-on-5, though. He hasn't been fantastic at all at even strength, although he seems to be getting about as many shot attempts as usual. They're not registering as dangerous as they have been the last couple of years, like his individual expected goals rates down to pre-breakout levels for Vincent Trocheck. I still think he can be a 60-point player even without that top power play time, but he seems to need a couple of percentages to break well for him to get there. Otherwise, I wonder if Trocheck, if we just bump him back down and say, yeah, 55-point guy, we were wrong about his 70-point potential. What a bummer that he hasn't panned out, especially for anyone who's owned him and rode the roller coaster of like, yeah, I have Vincent Trocheck. I got him at a decent price for what I think he'll do. And then he got injured and then he came back and then he did nothing. So a rough year for Vincent Trocheck. Curious to know where he'll land in drafts next year.
Yeah, Adam is saying in the chat room that maybe, Brian, let me know. Like, do you think that potentially this injury is a reason why he's slowed down? Like, maybe he was going to do better. And maybe, like, that's the reason why he's not on the top power play, because the coach knows that he's not 100% after his injury. Like, as Adam is saying that he's, like, a guy to target next year. And, hey, if the value falls low enough, if you could get him maybe among the 60-point guys, then maybe he's someone to take a chance on, because if he gets back on that top power play, maybe something can happen. But, I don't know. I wouldn't want to bank on it, but I guess it depends how low you could get him at.
So I did have that thought that maybe the injury was something, but what's he playing for? If the injury is like, maybe he's playing a little scared. I don't know. I did have the thought, but I have nothing to really back it up. And if you think of why he's on the second power play unit, I don't think it's because he's injured. I think it's because the top unit has Huberdeau, Huffman, Dadonov, and Barkov, all of whom are going to be back next year unless one of them gets traded away in the offseason. So there's not a whole lot of room for Vincent Trocheck to move up the power play depth chart unless there's some sort of roster overhaul in Florida in the offseason.
Yeah, I think he'll be a really interesting guy to talk about. And also, one question I'm going to be asking you a lot over the offseason is, who is going to be next year's Vincent Trocheck? Who's someone who broke out this year that's going to fall back down and is going to be super overrated? So I don't have an answer off the top of my head right now, but I'd love to hear your answer either now or later. And also tweet at us at Keeping Karlsson. Let us know who's your next year's Vincent Trocheck.
Yeah, I would love to hear who people think that is, and if there is somebody else who's going to get squeezed off a top power play unit. Like that will happen somewhere, right? So let us know if you have a suspicion of who it's going to be. In the chat, Adam M was pointing out that it was an Achilles injury for Vincent Trocheck, which brings back memories of Erik Karlsson, right? He had his, Adam was saying it was a lacerated Achilles. Oh, but Dave is now saying it was a fractured ankle. So I was going to say, remember when Karlsson came back from the Achilles thing, it took him some time to get up to speed. Maybe that's what's happening with Trocheck, but he's also lost a big chunk of the most significant source of his points on that top unit, and we don't know when he'll get it back.
Okay, I don't think that this guy will necessarily be the next Vincent Trocheck. It's hard to guess, right? But one name that jumps to mind, someone who finally got huge deployment this year, maybe Elias Lindholm next year falls back to being what he was before this amazing breakout. I don't know. It depends what happens in Calgary over the offseason, but I don't know. Something to think about. Let's move on. Oh, actually, though, since we're on Florida, we got to talk about Sam Frinkin Montembeault. 4 straight wins? What? Who is this? How does goalies? I can't. Like, he got this win over LA yesterday for his 4th straight win. Got to imagine he has a good chance of getting 2 of, if not all 3 of Florida's starts next week. Like I said, Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. So there's no, back-to-backs. They play Dallas, Arizona, and Boston in those 3 games. Maybe you got like a win or 2 in there for Montembeault. Like, is he a must-add for anyone with open goalie spots on any of those days at this point? Like, why would the Panthers play Luongo or Reimer when they know what they have with these guys, which is, I don't know, not so much at this point. It doesn't seem like, what do you have to gain? Might as well play Montembeault and see what you can do.
I would be really happy if my opponent added Samuel Montembeault for this week. It's really hard to call him a must-add. He's someone, again, that I'd rather have playing against me this week than for me. Look, even if you control for the weak goaltending the Panthers have been getting from Luongo and Reimer, they're still a bottom 10 team in terms of offering up high-quality chances against them night in, night out. And as of late, the Panthers seem to be slipping even more that way while Montembeault's in net. But lucky for Samuel Montembeault, the Panthers have been making up for it on offense, offering run support to the tune of 6, 6, 4, and 4 goals over his last 4 starts. That adds up to 20 goals in Montembeault's last 4 games. And of course, Montembeault is not going to average 5 goals for every single night. So if you want to start Montembeault, okay, that's your move to make. Just know what you're getting into, because 5 straight wins may be the big blaring headline for Montembeault, but beneath that is a .906 save percentage, generous offensive support, 2 mediocre AHL seasons, and a dangerously porous defense in front of him.
Yeah. No, you make a lot of sense. But if you want wins, like the thing is, Florida does score a lot of goals, right? So you're gonna have a chance to get wins just because
yes. Yeah, well, yeah, if they keep scoring 5 goals a game, Elon, where do you think Florida ranks in the league in wins this year, though? Even like having a mostly healthy team.
Well, okay. I'm assuming pretty low since they're not in a playoff spot currently, but they are playing Dallas? I guess Dallas is pretty good. They're in a playoff spot. Arizona's in a playoff spot, and Boston's in a playoff spot. I don't know. Okay.
So Florida has 32 wins. It's 3 more than Anaheim.
Yeah, but that's with Luongo and Reimer in.
Yeah, but I don't think Montembeault is better, is what I'm saying. How can you say that Montembeault with a .906 save percentage is better than those guys just because Florida scored 20 goals with him in net over the last 4 games?
Hey, everything you're saying makes perfect sense. I will counter by saying that if it was so obvious, if he was so good, then he wouldn't be available for anyone to add out of free agency, and we wouldn't even be talking about him. It's pretty hard and unlikely to get a guy who might give you 2 or 3 starts on a team that is not the Ottawa Senators, let's say, to be available in free agency for a playoff week. So I got to mention him on the show, Brian. I'm just doing my job here. You're saying leave him be, but I'm saying it would be pretty hard for me, especially if it's in a league where there's a lot of goalies points, and it's hard to get goalies. We got a starting goalie. It's looking like, do you at least agree that it's likely that he's going to play at least 2 of these 3 games?
Yes, I guess, unless he totally blows it, which is very possible in the first game. Then we don't see him again.
I guess. I don't know. He's hot. I think the Panthers are going to ride him. I guess you're right. But even if he does blow, they have nothing to play for. So why not let him keep playing? Like I said, I just don't see a reason for them to go and ride Roberto Luongo any longer. Let the guy rest already. Okay. Speaking of by the way, I promised that update. The Islanders beat Minnesota 3-2 in overtime. Brock Nelson scored the overtime winner. The Islanders, I wasn't planning on bringing this up this week, but just really quickly, they've shifted up their lines. They've been loading up the top line with Barzal, Eberle, and Anders Lee on that top line. So that, I think, makes all 3 of those guys a little bit more appealing as opposed to being spread around. And finally, I feel like I can say it was the right decision for me to drop Josh Bailey way back when. He's now pointless in 6 games. Will you agree, Brian? People should drop Josh Bailey now. He's not on the top line. He's not on the top power play. Just give it, please. Just say it. People should drop Josh Bailey, right? Pointless in 6.
Okay, drop Josh Bailey now, but you were mistaken if you did it earlier.
Hey. All I know is I don't have to worry about having him on my roster going into my couple semifinals. So we were talking about Montembeault. Let's get to another goalies. These 2 on cold streaks, though. So Frederik Andersen, I got to bring him up. If you've been on Twitter, you've been, I'm sure, already seeing a lot about Frederik Andersen. People love talking about the Leafs. Did you know that, Brian? So Andersen has been one of the most consistent goalies all season, and then he totally destroyed his fantasy owners this week if they had him in a playoff matchup. 3 straight sub 800 save percentage games. Sometimes we bring up goalies who have 3 straight sub 900 save percentage games, and we say these guys are slumping. I'm talking save percentages in the 700s for the last 3 games for Andersen against Tampa, Chicago, and Philly. He actually got the win versus Philly. How often does a goalie have a sub 800 save percentage and still get a win? It helps when your team scores 7 goals, of course. So is Andersen now a scary goalie to start down the stretch until he shows that he's figured things out? Is he the type of goalie that you have to consider sitting? Obviously, I don't think we're going to tell anyone to drop him, but, a lot of people have these daily goalie sit or start decisions. And I feel like at this point, how could you trust Frederik Andersen, who, I don't know, is it something wrong with him? Is it something wrong with the team? Can you just blame it on Jake Gardner being injured or something? Obviously that doesn't help, and he's not coming back anytime soon anyways. He's week to week, I think, still. But yeah, what are your thoughts on Frederik Andersen? Do you even have a way to look into this? How can we tell if it's just a matter of Frederik Andersen is bad now and you need to sit him until he figures it out? Or can you play him with confidence and just say it was a weird week and just forget about it?
You can't really, tease that apart just based on this last week. So you can try and come up with some theories. One might be the Leafs defense has been significantly worse over the last week, which it hasn't quite been the case. You're right that maybe they're missing Jake Gardner a little bit, but they're still good enough defensively that Freddie Andersen should not be giving up like 4, 5, 6 goals against. So my other theory, and one that we've wondered about for the last couple years, as long as he's been in Toronto, is maybe the guy's getting tired. He ranks 8th in minutes played by goalies this year, and he's pacing for 60 starts, which when you're a team hoping to go on a deep playoff run, you wonder if that's really a wise decision. And then, of course, you see Marc-Andre Fleury leading the league in minutes played for Vegas, and he's 5 years older than Freddie Andersen and also hoping to go on a deep cup run. But anyway, you can second guess whether or not the Leafs have made the right decision by playing Andersen as much as they have this year and whether that's a factor. It just is so out of character for Freddie Andersen to be blowing starts. He has a quality start percentage at 64% this year. Amongst all the other workhorse goalies, only 2 have been more reliable night in, night out. You want to try and name them, Elon?
Goalies who have been more reliable than Frederik Andersen?
Yeah, in terms of not blowing up your numbers, playing league average or better.
Okay, so I guess Vasilevsky jumps out?
Yeah.
Marc-Andre Fleury?
No.
Oh, well, those were the 2 obvious ones to me. I don't know. I could think it through, but that might be boring for the show. Calgary, Carolina, Chicago, Colorado, no. Columbus, no. Well, not Bobrovsky, no. He had that bad run for sure. It's not him. Dallas, Florida, Los Angeles, no, definitely
you
not
missed
them.
it. Ben Bishop in Dallas.
Obviously, Ben Bishop, Mr. Shutout Streak himself.
Quality starts 67.5% of the time, which is fantastic. And Elon, I'd be remiss not to mention that just under Freddie Andersen in terms of reliability, Darcy Kemper with a quality start in 63% of his start. So, of course, I credit Arizona with doing a lot to protect him, but you must be happy. You didn't even have to bring him up. I brought him up twice this episode already. What a great fantasy own he's made.
Yeah, I mean, now it's like overrated how much. Like next year, if he does not so well, then you're gonna be like, "Oh, Elon, your boy Darcy Kemper is sure not holding up." I mean, I did bring up, and I will stand by it, that I do think that you are giving a lot of weight to a small sample size when he wasn't playing well in Minnesota, and now. Hey, fine. Roll your. Like, how many more? Like, what if he has a good season next year? Like, let's just pretend. Let's role play. Let's say it's a year from now, and we're talking about how Darcy Kemper has had another great season. Like, Antti Ranta got injured again, and Kemper once again played a full season. We're talking about the 2019-20 playoffs. Will you still be rolling your eyes when I say, "Wow, Darcy Kemper seems like a really good goalie"?
Well, not necessarily, but you're saying small sample size when he has been good for like a small sample size too. I don't want to get into this again. Everybody knows our thoughts on Darcy Kemper. I think I don't think there are too many teams he could play on this season and put up a .921 save percentage, but all credit where credit is due, right? And back to Freddie Andersen, I don't know. If you own him, what other choice do you have though than to just trot him out night after night and see how he does? You have to think that most nights, even if he does falter, the Leafs are going to give him a chance to win. He's been reliable all year. So unless he's had a very, very sudden bout of fatigue where the impact has been just crazy right off the start, I expect he'll be okay the rest of the season. And really, the Leafs don't have another choice. They could play Garrett Sparks, but we've seen that he can't quite get the job done. And now you've got the Leafs actually in a funny position, playoffs-wise. I mean, they're pretty set where they are, but you wonder, I don't know, I just saw someone saying maybe they'll end up playing Tampa first round if they drop far enough, which is incredibly unlikely, but it's still on the table mathematically.
It's mathematically on the table, but that would also involve Montreal figuring their stuff out, and they got shut out by Chicago yesterday. Yeah. I don't think that the Leafs have much to worry about, and I think if anything, play Garrett Sparks. If you lose games, whatever, maybe Frederik Andersen just needs rest if you're saying that maybe he's tired. And I'm sure you could hear the same conversation in every other hockey podcast that you have on your feed, so we could probably move on. By the way, Brian, I should point out that I did tweet at Catherine Silverman, who's a big, I think, beat writer for the Arizona Coyotes. Like, she's always tweeting about the Coyotes, really great tweets. And I asked her who she thinks is going to be the starter next year once Ranta is healthy, and she said Ranta. So she's also not as high on Kemper as maybe I've seemed to be. But let's move on from them. Okay, another struggling goalie actually I wanted to bring up, and I guess it's a pair, a struggling goalie and a goalie doing well, both on the Colorado Avalanche. Semyon Varlamov has put up 4 straight 900 save percentage or less games going into today's game, and smartly, Colorado decided to play Philip Grubauer, who's been doing pretty well lately, and they were rewarded. and his owners were rewarded. Anyone who added him because he got a shutout against the Devils, stopping 22. Grubauer also shut out Buffalo last Saturday, so he's taking advantage of some of these teams that are having trouble scoring goals. He also stopped 30 of 32 versus Carolina on Tuesday. At this point, are we looking at for the rest of the season, Philip Grubauer is the goalie to own in Colorado? If you have Semyon Varlamov, is it time to let him go? And if Grubauer is available, is it time to add him? Next week, Colorado plays Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, Sunday against Minnesota, Dallas, and then 2 Chicagos on the weekend. So definitely those Chicago games are a bit scary with the way they've been scoring, but Minnesota on Tuesday, I feel like I'd be pretty comfortable playing Grubauer against Minnesota on Tuesday if he ends up getting the start, and I think he probably will.
It's been a long time, though, since Colorado showed any commitment to Philip Grubauer. Before he started back-to-back games, not dates, but like 2 games in a row for Colorado on March 9th and March 11th, you had to go back to the first games of the 2019 calendar year more than 2 months earlier, way back at the start of January, to find Grubauer starting in 2 straight Avalanche games. That was a time when Varlamov was struggling, and so Grubauer got a bunch of starts, but was also screwing them up himself too. So it's really been hard to predict, because even if Grubauer keeps getting another start, I think he could blow up any given night, which means that Varlamov gets the net back. And if I'm looking at the two, if I'm Colorado and I'm fading from the Western Conference playoff picture, and I'm trying to figure out which goalie gives me the best chance of winning night in, night out, based on the numbers this season, that's Semyon Varlamov. So I do think they probably ride the hot hand in Grubauer until he falters, but that could very well be this next game, in which case you'd be very unhappy to own him.
So you think that Grubauer is going to blow it against Minnesota? Come on. No.
It's possible. It's a friendly matchup for him for sure. So it'd be really nice if he could hold that down and earn another. I think the net will be his until he blows it. And like I said, he just has not been reliable this year. So that's not a guarantee that it'll last beyond 1 game. But if you want to try and get at least 1 game, possibly 3 out of him this week, by all means, go for it. It would be his longest consistently good stretch of the season if that does happen.
Okay, Brian, let's say you have Ben Bishop and he's injured right now, and someone else already has Hudobin. You can't just pick up the backup. You need a goalie for next week. You're not going to hit your minimum starts. You've got Grubauer and you've got Sam Montembeault.
Grubauer.
You're going Grubauer. Okay, so that puts things in context. By the way, as I'm saying that this looks like an easy start, you know what else looked like a pretty easy start? Probably Garrett Sparks against the Ottawa Senators yesterday, and we all saw how that turned out, as Adam's saying here in the chat room.
There's no such thing as an easy start for Garrett Sparks. I feel like that's happened several times this year, where it's just like, oh yeah, Garrett Sparks backing up for the Leafs against a weaker opponent, for sure. And then he just blows up your numbers in a way that you cannot bounce back from. I blame anybody or anyone who did try and get that Garrett Sparks spot start has nobody to blame but themselves. IMO.
Come on, it's so hard.
Sorry, guys.
It's really hard.
That was rude.
Do the people who got blown up by Frederik Andersen also have to blame themselves, or is that just like bad luck? Your life sucks.
No, that's bad luck.
Yeah, for sure. By the way, I guess I should mention, to complete Leafs talk, even though I promised that I already moved on from it, Kasperi Kapanen, I think we mentioned he was like sick last week, but now he's apparently out with a concussion. He's going to be out for a while. So William Nylander has jumped onto the Matthews line with Andreas Johnsson. So that's a pretty appealing place for Nylander to be, a lot better than on the third line, right? So, but at the same time, the Leafs are sliding. They keep losing games, so who knows if there's going to be more shakeups. But I feel like if Nylander's in free agency, probably he's a guy worth grabbing for next week, playing with Matthews.
And just to drive the point home on Garrett Sparks, he started 14 games this year. 6 of those have been quality starts. Ugh.
Woof. Okay, so there we go. Those are our cold streaks. Let's shift gears now and talk about players who have probably been like in free agency for pretty much the whole season. Guys who our eyes would have glazed over if we saw their name in a box score all throughout the season, and out of nowhere right now, just in time for the fantasy playoffs, they're on hot streaks. So let's play a game, a classic Keeping Karlsson game of sustainable or fleeting. And I'm going to bring up a bunch of no names, and you're going to tell me if you think that these players are going to keep it up for the next week or two, or if you think there's very little chance that they'll continue and you should just leave them in free agency. I want to start in Dallas with Roope Hintz. I looked it up. It's Roope, just like Lupe, the cleaning person that George. Okay. Anyway,
I was gonna say, oh, are you not going with that? I thought that's good.
Lupe, what is she? She's the custodian?
I have a Lupe also.
Wait, just remind me again. What's the word for what Lupe is? She was the cleaning lady. I think she's just called the cleaning lady or the maid. Yeah. Okay. Let's start in Dallas with Rupe Hintz, who I feel like all season long I've just been calling him Rupe Hintz because I never felt there was a reason to like actually look up how to pronounce his name. But apparently it's Rupe, just like Lupe, the cleaning lady who George hooked up with on Seinfeld. Yeah, so Rupe Hintz, he's riding a 3-game goal scoring streak, not only a point streak, a goal scoring streak going into today's game versus the Canucks, which, by the way, that game has started. It's currently 2-1 for Vancouver in the third period. So far, no goals for Rupe Hintz, but you got to imagine he's going to have a good chance to get you a point because he's been playing on the top line with Seguin and Radulov, and also the top power play with those two, of course, Jamie Benn and John Klingberg. Brian, who the F is Rupe Hintz? And is this guy for real? Dallas plays Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday next week, so a boring schedule. But if you're going to tell me that this top line, top power play guy on the Stars is a real player and this isn't just weird luck, I feel like people might need to try to make room for him anyways.
Well, before I do, Lupe is also the name of Lucille Bluth's housekeeper in Arrested Development. And also for the hip hop heads out there, there's Lupe Fiasco. Lupe is also how you feel after one too many drinks. But back to Rupe Hintz, he was a second-round pick back in 2016, drafted 49th overall by the Dallas Stars. This is his second year as a pro. He was a point-per-game player to begin this season in the AHL, which is not how he was last season, but he was this season. He had 9 goals and 13 assists for 22 points in 21 games before getting called up to Dallas and staying there. And lately, Rupe Hintz has seen this huge bump in deployment that you mentioned, Elon. Lupe, I'm going to call him Lupe now. Rupe Hintz went from 10 to 12 minutes a night playing with Brett Ritchie and Denis Gurianov to getting 14 to 16 minutes a night playing with Radulov and Seguin at even strength, plus that top power play time, and he is making the most of it. Hintz has 14 shots over his last 4 games. It's too soon to say exactly what he may have to offer. Like as a player, it would be so nice if Dallas finally had another guy who could actually score aside from Seguin, Benn, and Radulov, especially now that we've given up on Spezza. Dauber Prospects, one of our favorite resources for checking how prospects are rated in terms of upside and offense. They seem to think that Hintz can be a player. Regardless of what he's going to be, right now, he is a must-own with this current deployment, and I feel like this current deployment is also going to stick. Jamie Benn has a goal tonight also, and I don't think it came, I think it came at 5-on-5, so with his regular line mates, and if Dallas can run 2 lines, it'd be the first time in a while that they could do it, and I don't think they'll pass up that opportunity so long as Hintz can be a good complementary piece on that top line, and so far it's looking like he is.
And by the way, hey, Dallas on Tuesday plays against the goalie that Brian thinks is sure to blow up any day now, Sam Montembeault.
Oh, yeah.
So definitely you got to grab Rupe Hintz for that game, according to Brian, not according to me necessarily.
What do you don't think you should grab Rupe Hintz?
Nah, I feel like for a Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, you might have better options if you're not going to be able to fit him into your lineup. But let us know your options. I like him. I like his spot, but I don't know if in a playoff week I'm wasting an ad to grab someone who's not actually getting me extra games and I have to just sit someone else and play him over them and I'm not actually gaining games by adding. You know what I mean, right? That's my take. Also, I don't think that Sam Montembeault is going to blow up as quickly as you do. It's hard to predict. Dallas doesn't score like that many goals, right? This Jamie Benn goal was assisted by Valerie Nichushkin, though actually it doesn't look like today he's been playing with Nichushkin. He's been playing with Jason Dickinson and Joel L'Esperance. So there's more players that we're probably mispronouncing their names, but we don't care because they're not relevant. And maybe next year I'll be asking you, who's Joel L'Esperance? And it should people, but right now we can still pretend like he's just a big nobody. And Rupe Hintz is the guy that you want on Dallas for sure. Okay, so let's go to New Jersey. They have a really decimated lineup. It looks really terrible when you see their lines with everyone injured. We've already talked about them, I think even just last week. But a couple players we didn't discuss are defensemen Damon Severson and Will Butcher. And both of them, even with this decimated lineup, they've been getting some points. Severson put up 4 points in 3 games, including 1 goal, 1 assist versus Edmonton on Wednesday before going pointless in his most recent 2 games, Friday versus Vancouver, and then today versus Colorado. The Devils got shut out, like we said, by Grubauer. Though Severson did have 5 shots today, so that's really good if your league counts that. He was also -3 if your league counts that. Brian, don't get mad at me for all this plus minus talk, but maybe
I don't know. I was harsh before. I understand lots of leagues still count it. We just don't recommend it.
Yeah, and hey, I mean, it's obviously not great if he was on the ice for 3 goals against, but there's better metrics to determine how good a player is defensively, namely like shot attempts and all that. But let's not get into that whole debate. Severson, though, has been kind of unheralded this series, up to 37 points in 74 games, which means he's probably going to end up with 40. Like, there's a good shot that he could get there. Usually we say 40-point defensemen are fantasy relevant and worth owning, especially in deepish leagues. We haven't talked about him at all. I love that he took 5 shots today. Is Damon Severson someone that people should maybe be looking to add for the rest of the season if they need defense? It also looks like he's bumped Will Butcher from the top power play. Like today, Severson had a lot more power play time than Butcher did. And by the way, Butcher, though, was also hot finally. He had a 4-game assist streak going into today. Of course, no points today. So I'm curious to get your thoughts on both Severson and Butcher going into next week. It's hard to imagine Devils are going to score that many goals, but maybe one of these guys will get in on them. Their schedule is Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. So again, a boring slate against Washington, Boston, and Arizona. So against 3 good goalies. Do you think that it's worth grabbing one of them? And if so, like, which one would you want?
Nah, I am so uninterested in anyone on New Jersey. I don't love either Severson or Will Butcher. If you're making me pick one, I'll go Damon Severson. Butcher is the one getting better power play deployment. But
Not,
he's
not
sorry,
yesterday,
but
not
right, you
today.
said so sorry. Let me rephrase. Butcher has been the one getting better power play deployment and not doing a whole lot with it. He has 13 power play points on the year compared to Severson's 10. So, and that's with more minutes and better line mates with the man advantage. So for that reason, I will just go Severson. Will Butcher, we asked at the start of the season, is he elite? It was tongue in cheek, but so far he has not really made a case to be called elite.
So, Brian, you're kind of like really swatting aside Damon Severson. You do have to acknowledge he's on pace to put up 40 points this season. Generally, you consider that to be fantasy relevant, right? You say that he's been unsustainable to get all these points. Like, he's having a good season.
He's having an okay season. We see him run hot and cold very often. And I also this is also me speaking to just not really counting on New Jersey being able to score a whole lot of goals. Like Severson has a 3-game point streak, which is great. But you look at the 20 games before that, he had 8 points over 18 games in the month preceding this. So that's why I'm concerned. Like, he's not a slam dunk at all. Of course, no one in your free agency is. So sure, you can go ahead and add him if you want, but he's not someone who really excites me. He doesn't take a lot of shots. He might not keep getting good power play time. So I don't know. I guess I've added him and been burned by him several times before. So maybe I'm a little gun shy about it, but he's not I'll take him over Vlasic and Tim Heat. How about that?
How about Ekholm? Will you have him over Ekholm if we're building a ranking here?
Yes.
Okay, well, that's not so bad. Though like I said, I am concerned about that schedule next week because it's not only just Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, but against potentially Holtby and then Rasker, Halak, and then Kemper. So that's going to be a tough week. Probably just want to stay away from all the Devils. Let's do a few more defensemen. Let's add to this list. So as usual, there are a bunch of fun names producing on the Tampa Bay Lightning because they score so many goals and everyone gets in on them. Victor Hedman, by the way, who we talked about being kind of not cold, but like not as hot as he was last year, a few weeks ago, or maybe a couple months ago now. He's red hot right now, 9 points his last 9 games. Ryan McDonough has 4 points in his last 4 games, bringing him to a quiet 37 points, pacing for 42 on the season. So pretty solid season for Ryan McDonough, who generally you just want to get like a half point per game from him and then all those good peripherals. The name I want to bring up, though, someone who might be in free agency for you is Eric Cernak.
I think it's Chernak.
Okay, thank you very much. Eric Chernak, who has been playing on the top pairing with McDonough lately, and he's been picking up some points, including a goal yesterday versus Washington. He had an assist on Thursday versus Detroit. And really, generally, you haven't had Eric Chernak in your roster for points. He's been great for hits. Like, if you're in a multi-cat league, he's giving you a good amount of hits and even some shots and blocks to go along with them every single game. But now, if Chernak is getting this increase in deployment, like if he's playing on the top pairing, he's been seeing like over 20 minutes per game a lot recently. Maybe he's a guy you want to add, especially because unlike all these other people we've been talking about playing Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, Tampa, I think, has the best schedule of the week, at least at the start of the week. Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, Saturday. So you can get 3 games right at the start of the week, 2 of them on off days. If you want to add a Tampa defenseman, I guess, well, it was just in general, like, who is Eric Chernak, I guess, first of all, and do you think he makes for a good ringer to bring onto your team? To me, it kind of seems similar to like Sanheim back when we brought him up originally. The reason why I was starting to get into Sanheim is he had a couple points in a couple games in a row, and I was also really into how he was jumping up to the top pairing and getting more minutes. So obviously Eric Chernak can't be a nobody if he's playing on the top pairing on the Tampa frickin' Bay Lightning, am I right?
Yeah, to some extent, it's really nice to have a new fantasy relevant option, especially in leagues that count a lot of his peripherals. If you want to get to know Eric Chernak, you can know that he was actually drafted by Los Angeles back in 2015 in the second round, 43rd overall. And then they traded him to Tampa to acquire Ben Bishop 2 years ago around this time. Most of us forget that Ben Bishop ever took a turn in an LA Kings jersey. He did. It was nothing particularly remarkable or interesting. Eric Chernak, the difference between, like you mentioned, Travis Sanheim, Chernak does not have the same offensive upside. His peripherals seem much more reliable than any points he'll be able to give you, but his peripherals are becoming increasingly reliable. Chernak began the year with third pairing minutes, and he's actually creeping up all season long to the point that he's almost seeing first pairing minutes in terms of volume, right? Like, we know he's not necessarily the first pairing guy, but he's seeing about 20 minutes a night lately, which is great. And that does make Chernak a great ringer in multi-category leagues. But again, not the same offensive upside as Sanheim, though of course you have to like that Chernak plays with one of the top offenses in the league, which is something that anybody playing with Tampa has going for them.
Yeah, I feel like, like I said, Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, give me at least 1 point in those 3 games to go along with the peripherals. And maybe if you get lucky, you get a couple. Probably not, but maybe you'll get him. By the way, since we're on Tampa, we did tell people to grab Tyler Johnson last week, I'm pretty sure, because he was playing on that line with Braden Point and Nikita Kucherov, league leader in points, Nikita Kucherov. By the way, Connor McDavid has gotten multi-point games like every single game since forever, it feels like lately, and still he's so far back from Kucherov. That just goes to show how good Kucherov has been. Anyways, Tyler Johnson, goals in 3 straight games, points in 4 straight games. Try eligible. Like I said, amazing schedule next week. I'm looking on Yahoo, still only 45% owned. I feel like this is like boring because like how can anyone who's ever listened to this show over the past couple of weeks knows that we've already told you to grab Tyler Johnson. But I'm seeing 45% owned in Yahoo, which means there's 55% of leagues where you can grab this guy. I don't care how shallow your league is, by the way. Like if you're in a league even where there's only 6 teams, assuming that your roster is full on Tuesday and Thursday, like drop someone playing Tuesday, Thursday, grab Tyler Johnson, get his Monday, Wednesday, and then you could drop him for the rest of the week. Like, who else is going to give you better production in those 2 off days?
I just want to mention, Elon, you're talking about these Tuesday. I know Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday are super busy days, and you're like counting them as not even a day if you're trying to cycle in depth players. I can tell you on Tuesday and Thursday, I have empty roster spots. Like my team is spread out. So like, don't go running quickly to make changes without checking your lineup first. Like, obvious advice, but just double check that you actually, might have guys on your bench on Tuesday, because some lineup configurations won't.
Yes, I hope that is obvious. If you're dropping someone playing Tuesday to get someone playing Monday, but obviously check your rosters for the week. That's what I like to do going into a playoff week anyways. Check your roster every single day of the week and see who you have sitting on all of the busy days. Those are guys you might want to consider dropping because you're obviously not going to get that many games out of them. But yeah, Tyler Johnson, I feel like I can't imagine a team that wouldn't benefit from getting Tyler Johnson's Monday, Wednesday games, especially if you have someone sitting on Tuesday. But even if not, probably you have someone like Brian. Like, we're dropping Sam Reinhart for Tyler Johnson, right? Or you're probably going to say no, you'd rather hold Sam Reinhart.
No, I'll take Tyler Johnson.
Yeah, he's playing with Kucherov and Point. Like that is a good third wheel spot. That is for sure. And he's hot. So he's hitting all of the check boxes. By the way, in the chat here, I'm seeing that Montembeau has already led in a goal today. I forgot to mention Florida plays today. So yeah, that could put a wrench in my idea that he's going to play 3 games next week. Anaheim is winning 1-0. I see that Ryan Getzlaf assisted on Devon Shore's power play goal, but I feel like we're not allowed to talk about Ryan Getzlaf, Brian, because that earned us a 1-star review last week. Sorry, I know I'm spilling a little tea here and probably sounding whiny, but by the way, guys, it hurts my feelings. Like, we're not a big corporation here. We're just Elon and Brian trying to make you a nice show, and then you drop us these mean reviews when we're just trying our best to help you out.
It wasn't even that mean. Like, it seemed like it could have been constructive feedback. Malkovich, I bet you're still listening too. Like, it doesn't even sound like you don't like the show.
Yeah, it was like, I love you guys, but you talk too much about Getzlaf, and the show's too long.
There's options for 4 stars, 3 stars, 2 stars. Lots of different ways to express. We have a Twitter account. You can just let us know how you're feeling. Give us a chance to anyway.
I'll stop. I'll stop now. But I will throw it out there. If anyone wants to help us, because these 1-star reviews do hurt us on iTunes, and if you want to help us out, be our friends, if you throw up some 5-star reviews to counteract that, that would really be appreciated. If you like the show, and if you don't like the show, let us know. We'll try to improve it. Anyways, all I'm saying is Ryan Getzlaf probably was worth discussing last week because he had a 3-point game last week. He's got an assist today. Clearly, he is worth owning, even though you said that he's should have been dropped a million years ago. He's Ryan Getzlaf. He's good. He was like an 80-point guy for the past few seasons when he's healthy. Let's go to more hot streaks. Hopefully, we haven't annoyed anyone too much with this rant. We're talking about defensemen, right? Connor Murphy on Chicago. Is he someone people have to be thinking about? He scored versus Montreal yesterday. That was his 3rd point in 4 games. And just like Chernak, he's getting more ice time lately. He's got over 20 minutes in 4 of his last 5 games. And he's been amazing for hits and blocks. He had 4 hits and 4 blocks yesterday versus Montreal to go along with his goal. So he was a great guy and 2 shots. He was a great guy if you streamed him in last week. Going into next week, another good schedule, by the way. Chicago plays Monday, Thursday, Saturday, Sunday. So if you need a defenseman who's going to give you peripherals, and if Chernak isn't available, or maybe you could tell me, Brian, who you like more between Connor Murphy and Chernak, or if you think neither of them are especially appealing.
I feel like Connor Murphy is a good alternative option if Chernak is already gone. Like, I don't see much reason like Chernak that his points are going to keep coming. Murphy has 12 points in 41 games. And unlike Chernak, I mean, you mentioned how his time on ice has gone up like over the last few games. With Chernak, we've seen a much steadier climb. So I don't see any big changes around Connor Murphy that make me think things are about to really continue being better like they have been for the last handful of games. So yeah, I prefer Eric Chernak, but Connor Murphy isn't a bad option for peripherals if Chernak has already been taken.
Okay, and if you are tired of these depth D-men, there's a guy on Chicago whose percent ownership has been skyrocketing on Yahoo, and for good reason. We got to talk once again about Brendan Perlini. We brought him up last week. I feel like Dave said on the show, don't give me any of this BS about adding Chicago players. You're not going to want to do that. Well, if you did add Brendan Perlini, then you were rewarded with goals in 3 straight games. He's now up to 8 goals and 2 assists in his last 7 games. This guy's on fire playing on his line with Alex DeBrincat and Dylan Strome. And let's throw it out there. Alex DeBrincat, he's like a Braden Point, like last year we knew he was good. At this point, I feel like just playing with DeBrincat makes you worth owning, which is like, a whole other tier of fantasy players. So like DeBrincat is so good. Why not grab Perlini, who's on a hot streak? And Chicago, like I said, has a good schedule next week. And also Perlini's like a young guy. Like we still haven't seen his upsides. I'd be curious to know, Brian, like who is this Brendan Perlini? Like is he someone that you think does have offensive pedigree? And is he a must add for next week with this streak he's on and on this line that he's been producing with?
I don't think he has a ton of offensive pedigree. He is a former 1st round pick, was selected 12th overall by Arizona. And that's all I really like. He has not stood out as a 1st round sort of pedigree type guy over his career so far. Remember, he started in Arizona, never really got top deployment, but he occasionally got turned on the top line and has never even approached being a half point per game player. Even this year with Chicago, 14 points in 36 games, 11 of those are goals. So 3 assists, good for him. He has 5 goals on his last 13 shots. So he's really similar, Brendan Perlini, to someone like Vinny Hinostroza, who, if I'm not mistaken, they were traded for one another. And the thing with Brendan Perlini is that when he's being deployed well and has good line mates, maybe he'll get in on some points. Maybe he'll throw some shots on net. Otherwise, he's not doing a whole lot, but he is someone who I'm interested. Like, he's still just 22. He'll be turning 23 in April. So there's still time for him to grow as a player and develop. And he could be one of those guys who really starts hitting his stride around 23, 24 years old, given proper top 6 deployment. So we'll see how well he does over the rest of this stretch and how likely that is to encourage Chicago or any other team to want him playing in their top 6.
Yeah, well, I know why you would think that he was traded for Hinostroza, just because Chicago and Arizona seem to just only love trading with each other. But actually, no, Perlini went to Chicago in the trade that also saw Dylan Strome go to Chicago. It was Strome and Perlini for Nick Schmaltz. And just like Perlini, right, Dylan Strome was someone who was doing nothing in Arizona, and look how well he has done. So now we're seeing Brendan Perlini, who didn't get this opportunity that Dylan Strome did right off the bat. Now he is getting this opportunity. He's flourishing right now. Obviously, you're saying his shooting percentage is too high. I'm not saying I expect him to score a goal every single game, but I'd say to add him for next week if he's available. I like Chicago scoring goals, and he's on this great line with DeBrincat and Strome. So I'm into him. You're not as into him, but we'll see how it all shakes out at the end of the week.
Cool.
Cool. Okay, let's go. Another defenseman paired with a forward. Okay, so we talked about Murphy and Perlini. Let's talk about Dmitry Orlov and Brett Connolly over in Washington. People might be like starting to eyes glaze over all these names that are supposed to be fantasy relevant guys, but all these guys I'm bringing up are getting big points lately, and all you need is 1 week of big points to propel you to a fantasy championship. So Orlov over in Washington has got a 4-game assist streak going, 9 points in his last 10 games. Even with that, he's still on pace for only 30 points this season, which is what he's been doing for the past 3 seasons. Do you see anything different going on with Orlov recently that makes you think he can keep this recent surge going through the fantasy playoffs? Washington's got a Tuesday, Wednesday, Friday, Sunday next week, so another good schedule to bring up. And like Orlov's doing well, and I'm just curious to know, like, how is he doing this when he's generally been a 30-point guy forever?
Yeah, because he does this every so often. And I remember we've had this conversation a reasonable handful of times over the course of us doing this podcast together. And I was wondering if March, for some reason, was a better month than others. And like it is, like, so I'm looking at his career splits, and in his career, he has 30 points in 83 games in March, which is exactly confirming that he's a 30-point guy, even if you collect just his March games. It's the same thing if you collect just his February games, just his January games, just his December. Like, he is a 30-point player, and that's all you can ever expect from Dmitry Orlov. I was actually thinking of him as a comparable to Eric Chernak when you were bringing him up, because we've talked about Orlov when he's put together a few games with points and said, well, he's on a really talented team. Sometimes he shares the ice with Ovi or Kuznetsov or Backstrom, so that's a good thing for him. Right now, he's not any more interesting to me than he ever has been, in that, yeah, you can stream him in a super deep league. Otherwise, you really can't count on him to put up any points for you.
So how is he getting like all of these points recently? Is it just luck? Like, I guess you've looked at, I see that he's, I guess, taking the same number of shots as usual. His ice time seems the same as usual. So basically what you're saying is everything is kind of the same under the hood, and it just happens to be passing to someone who's maybe passing to someone. Like, these are all assists, right? So I guess he's just getting lucky more often than not, and the person he's passing to is ending up getting a goal. Or like, we're not going to give him any credit for this streak.
Yeah, well, when this usually happens, we look at a couple things. We look at his on-ice shooting percentage over the last little while, and that's a hard thing for me with the data we have available to do for a specific stretch. But generally, it's a safe assumption that his on-ice shooting percentage is higher than it usually has been. You also look, I'm looking at his last 6 points here since March 6th, and 4 of them are secondary assists, which there's debate over whether they're a little noisier than most in terms of being like as hard earned as primary assists, but I still operate on the assumption that a secondary assist can be a little more influenced by luck. And then you see those primary assists came on an Alex Ovechkin. Like, yeah, he passed it to Ovechkin. Ovechkin scored. Good for him. That's it. So yeah, I don't see anything actually changing in his game. There's just a few circumstances that seem to be favoring him.
Yeah. Okay. I agree with you. I just wanted to dig into it a little bit. Like, in the end of the day, you're saying, like, that's why you're the fantasy hockey robot. You're able to think above, just looking at this recent stretch and say, look, I'm just as into Dmitry Orlov now as I was a few weeks ago. And I'm sure a few weeks ago you would have said, hey, he's always decent for a stream because there's a chance he'll pass to Ovechkin, or he'll pass to someone who passes to Ovechkin. Ovechkin's going to score. He's almost at 50 goals. Once again, I think he scored 2 goals yesterday to bring him up to 48. So I'm very excited for another 50-goal season for Ovechkin, because he didn't hit it last year. It was very disappointing when he got so close, 49. Anyways, we're on Washington. So far, we've been shooting blanks here. Like, I got you on Rupe Hintz. You said you liked him. Then after that, you've been poo-pooing everyone I've brought up. And not to say I'm wrong, let's see if we can get the next one. Brett Connolly. He is kind of on a nice stretch. He's got 2 assists and then 1 assist in his last couple of games. He assisted on an Ovechkin goal yesterday, which got me excited for a second that maybe he was on Ovi's line. But I see that overall in the game, he's been a third liner playing with Eller and Hagelin. Like I said, Washington does have that great schedule next week, so it'd be so nice to find someone that you could potentially stream. Jacob Vrana is available in some leagues. He's not available in any of my leagues. Though usually, like, Jacob Vrana, who, seems like he's in better deployment. He's playing on the second line with Backstrom and Oshie most often. He only has 43 points on the season. Connolly has 40. They're not even that different. So if Verana's gone, are we into Connolly at all? And even if they're both available, is there any reason to expect Brett Connolly to be better than Verana, or am I really like just fishing here and I need to move on to some bigger name players?
You're fishing, and for anybody hoping you're going to get some bigger name players, I don't know that there's a whole lot coming up. We're almost done, but you're right. This has been sort of a litany of free agent fodder, and which guy might be able to keep some measure of production. And Brett Connolly is somebody who I've actually had as a deep free agent bid or a backup bid or like my fourth backup bid all season long. Connolly has not been so reliable, but when he does put up a point, obviously that's a good thing. Like I don't even know what sorry. Connolly hasn't been so reliable, but he's been reliable enough to be worth at least considering for a stream. He's pointed in 30 of his 72 games played so far this season. You could find players with better odds of pointing. You could find players with worse odds, but it's reasonable. It's a reasonable chance. So I'm trying to be optimistic here, Elon, after poo-pooing Dmitry Orlov and Connor Murphy and Brendan Perlini and Vinny Hinostroza. I'm trying to be a little more rosy colored, but I don't like Brett Connolly more than Jacob Vrana. I definitely prefer Jacob Vrana because he's playing with Oshie and Backstrom, and he's playing like 14 to 16 minutes a night, while Brett Connolly only has like 10 or 12 minutes a night on the third line to work with, and that's really limiting.
Yeah, okay, that's fair. In fact, I'm so bored with Brett Connolly that I started looking at Twitter and I saw a really funny tweet by Elliot Tieford, who's Ducks beat writer, and he wrote, Corey Perry with a monster shift ends up sliding into the net. Puck counts, players don't. So Perry did get something in the net, but it was himself and not a puck. Okay, more defensemen to bring up. Here's a bigger name for you, Brian. So Torrey Krug has been going through concussion protocol, and his timetable to return is unknown. So I guess we're kind of shifting into a little bit of injury talk here. We are going to end the show with a bit of injuries and outjuries. But I guess right on schedule, we have Charlie McAvoy heating up. He's got 5 points in his last 6 games. He's been getting top power play this last couple of games with Torrey Krug out. I assume McAvoy is a must-add if he's somehow available while Krug is out, ahead of like the Orlovs and the Chernaks and the Murphys of the world. Not even a question. Are you not talking?
No, sorry.
What, are you in the chat room?
No.
Is Meyer okay?
Yeah, everything's good. Thanks.
Okay. Did you hear my question?
Yeah. Is McAvoy ahead
better than
of
all these guys?
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. And like, let alone McAvoy's deployment, we always say the knock on him is he doesn't take shots, but he's taken 11 shots in his last 5 games, which is very un-McAvoy-like. He's actually been doing this even for a little while now. Over his last 20 games, Charlie McAvoy has taken 36 shots, and we're used to like 1 shot or less per game. So expect McAvoy to keep adding an extra shot here or there with the added responsibilities that he has while Torrey Krug is out. It'd be really weird if that stopped all of a sudden. So don't hold me to it. It is confusing to me, and I don't know what to make of these extra shots McAvoy is taking. But yes, I prefer him. I mean, of course, it depends on what category contributions you want. If you want someone who you know is going to contribute to your peripheral stats, then you probably want Chernak and maybe Murphy. But I would like McAvoy absolutely ahead of Orlov, regardless of what categories are counted in your league. And especially he's the guy I want most if you're looking just for points.
Yeah, I think either way, you grab McAvoy and then you drop someone else if you need those peripherals, because you want to have that top power play guy on Boston playing with Marchand and Bergeron and maybe even David Pastrnak, because apparently Pastrnak is scheduled to practice with the team tomorrow. Does that mean he'll be back for Tuesday's game? I don't know. I hope so, because I would really love to activate him just in time for like a couple semifinals. So yeah, definitely something to watch if you're a Pastrnak owner, or if you're an owner of someone like Danton Heinen, who could get bumped from the top line with Pastrnak returning. Though, just a reminder, Danton Heinen was actually playing on the top line before Pastrnak got hurt. Pastrnak, remember, had been playing on the second line with Krejci, so we'll have to wait and see how things look. We'll see how that practice goes tomorrow. I'm going to be watching Boston Twitter to see what's going on with David Pastrnak.
That's a really good reminder, Elon. I own Danton Heinen and David Pastrnak, and before you reminded me, I was just thinking, oh yeah, when Pastrnak comes back, I just drop Heinen right away. Now I'll have to think twice and look at who else on my roster I might be able to let go of, because Danton Heinen hasn't even been great on that top spot, right? He almost reminds me of like when Cody Eakin was playing with Sagan and Ben on the top line in Dallas for a while, or any sort of underwhelming third wheel. So he's not the most exciting player. He doesn't help you in a whole lot of categories, but hey, when he hits, he hits.
I mean, he hasn't been like an all-star. I mean, at the end of the day, he is Danton Heinen, but he had like a 4-game point streak before going pointless in his last couple. He had 3 shots in his last game. What do you expect, man? I mean, but it is good. Like, who would you rather have? Let's say Heinen stays on line 1. Do you want him or do you want Rupe Hintz?
I want Rupe Hintz.
Damn, I would take Heinen if he's playing with Bergeron and Marchand, just because like those guys are so good. Like just like with Brent Burns, I want to even just take a step back. Could we just like talk about how great Marchand and Bergeron are? They're both on pace to have career years. Just like I said, Brent Burns is. 30-year-old Brad Marchand had 1 goal and 1 assist yesterday. That brought him to 87 points in 71 games. That broke his career high of 85 points, and he's still got like 10 games to go, so he might get up to 100. He's on pace to hit 100 if he could keep this up for the rest of the season. I kind of think he's going to get there. Like Marchand is so good. I know that people hate him for different reasons. Maybe he's a bit dirty, whatever. The licking thing was kind of weird, but at the end of the day, like Brad Marchand, he's so good. And then Bergeron, like just as good. A goal and assist also yesterday. That brought him to 67 points in 56 games. Even with the time that Bergeron has missed this season, he's only a point away from his career high of 68 points. So I kind of have a similar question to what we were discussing with Burns. Like, what do you do? Like, obviously for the rest of this year, these guys are money. There's no questions to be asked about them. You want them in your lineup as many times as you can. But what do you, like, most of the time when players hit their 30s, you think they're going to start going on the downslide. These guys are both trending up. Obviously, it also helps that the NHL, there's just more goals happening overall, and that's helping. But like in a keeper league, I feel like people again are gonna like not, especially Bergeron, who's 33. People are gonna say, yeah, like now's a good time to sell him because he's gonna go down soon. But this guy is doing the best he's ever done.
They're doing so well, and a big reason for that is their power play production. They have already both surpassed or are sure to surpass last year's power play production. And one reason for that is that their on-ice shooting percentage on the power play this year is over 20%. That Boston power play has just been on fire, and that's helped Brad Marchand to get to 30 power play points in 71 games. Last year, he had 23 power play points in 68. The year before was 24 power play points in 80. Elon, do you know how many power play points Brad Marchand had the year before that?
Probably like so few, 10.
Yeah, you're close. 8. Like I love, my favorite hockey thing is that Brad Marchand only started playing. This is only his 3rd year seeing top unit power play time. What a world. And Patrice Bergeron has seen a similar surge in his power play numbers. So that is what's pacing them to be as successful as they have been in their overall point totals relative to the rest of their careers. I'm not sure if that's going to be something that sustains. So again, you have a Brent Burns situation where these guys at an unexpected age are having a career year, and you're trying to figure out in a keeper league, well, how exactly do I manage that value?
Yeah, just I don't know. I have no words. Like this Boston team, you just want to get in on this top line, and like Jake DeBrusk and all these other guys who just get a chance to play with these guys always have so much value just because they're playing with such amazing players. They've got that great exposure, as Pete Jensen would say.
Year in, year out, that Bruins line is the best, or one of, if not the best line in hockey.
Yeah, along with Kucherov, Point, and whoever, Tyler Johnson at the moment.
And me.
And Brian, don't be mad. I want to throw one more defenseman at you who people are going to snooze about. But this guy's like super hot. How can I not mention someone who has 8 points in their last 8 games and plays 4 games next week? Like people need D. So I got to talk about Brett Pesce on Carolina. Like I said, 8 points in his last 8 games. Like I remember a few weeks ago, I keep saying a few weeks ago, like I don't even know. The whole season just went by so fast. It's such a blur. But at some point we were talking about Jacob Slavin, who was on a great run. And at the time I was saying Slavin actually had more points than Hamilton and Falk. We have like now Pesce's another non-Hamilton, non-Falk Carolina defenseman getting a ton of points. So I should say Hamilton and Falk are actually doing decently lately. Anyway, are you seeing anything from Brett Pesce to make you think that he can continue getting these points, or is he in a similar category to Dmitry Orlov, who you're like, hey, thanks for the points, but I don't expect them to continue?
Yeah, that's exactly it. There's something fishy about Brett Pesce's production, and I can't expect it'll sustain. His minutes are the same. His shot rates are the same. Yes, he has 5 shots in his last 2, which is fantastic. Elon, do you know how many shots he had in the 8 games before that?
6.
3 shots.
Ooh, that's not good.
Yeah, but he had 7 points. Like, this isn't how things work in the NHL. So I'm glad Brett was able to get in on so much offense, but it is not something you can count on to continue. I've said that so many times this episode. But Elon, you're right. Like, in a deep league, sometimes these are the runs you just want to try and catch, right? So somebody like Pesce or Orlov might be one of the best guys available, or the only guy from a team that has the schedule that you need who's available. And so go for it. I'm just saying that none of them should be your first choice, or you shouldn't be betting a whole lot that they are going to help you out.
What I'm curious about, Brian, maybe let us know in the chat room if you have an opinion. Like, let's say next week, Brett Pesce ends up having a good week. Let's say he gets 3 points in his next 4 games. Next week, can we come on the show and I can be like, hey, guys, I brought up Brett Pesce, and look, he did well, so you're welcome. Or do we have to go on and say, guys, really sorry, Brian said that Brett Pesce wasn't going to be good, and he turned out to not be good. Like, I wonder, because people who listen to the show, maybe they don't need, like, maybe some people want your, I'm sure everyone wants your analysis, but I'm sure they also just want to get like a roundup of which players are hot, and then at the end of the day, they have to decide. Brian is saying he's not seeing anything to tell you that Brett Pesce is any different than he was 2 weeks ago, but we're acknowledging that he's on a hot streak, and hot streaks sometimes continue, right? Like, if we would have asked you this a week ago, you would have said it's not going to continue, and then it obviously did continue for this past week. So I think that was a very good rundown, and I appreciate just knowing whether or not there's something different about what he's doing, or if he's just kind of, you know, like you said, like he's getting a couple more shots in these last 2 games, but overall he's been getting all these points without getting many shots, and that is generally a sign that he's getting a bit lucky.
Same partner, same minutes, same deployment, same shot rates. Yeah, exactly.
Jan. Okay, since we're on Carolina, we should mention that incorrectly spelled first name Michael Furland is back from injury, but he hasn't gotten back in the top 6. Andrei Svechnikov has been playing on the second line with Teravainen and Stahl, and he scored a goal yesterday versus Buffalo. He also had 2 goals and 1 assist on Monday versus Colorado. So there's been a couple big games from Andrei Svechnikov recently, and like I said, he's getting this newly great deployment with Teravainen and Jordan Stahl. So could be a sneaky guy to stream in for next week. People might not realize that he's gotten this bump in his deployment, might think, oh yeah, I saw before. Like, Svechnikov throughout the season has been pretty quiet, but he has had a couple good games here and there, which has actually brought him up to 18 goals, which is pretty good. He's going to probably hit, well, he could hit 20 goals this year. Maybe he could even do it by the end of next week, because Carolina plays 4 times. Like I said, and Svechnikov on the second line, I could see him scoring a couple goals. So he's someone that I would definitely take a look at if you have space for him. And since we're on Carolina, got to give huge props to Petr Mrazek, who's been fantastic lately, seems to have taken the net from Curtis McElhinney. Like, Mrazek played 3 games in a row before McElhinney finally got the start yesterday versus Buffalo on the second half of a back-to-back. McElhinney got the win, but again, I don't know how much credit you want to give because Buffalo's been so quiet lately. So, Brian, I guess we were already comparing Montembeault with Grubauer. If Petr Mrazek is available, are you going to take Mrazek over Grubauer if you need that third goalie on your team?
I am. I love the way Carolina's playing lately, and Mrazek has been doing just fine, right? He's actually looking like he could be a reliable NHL goaltender, which is not a look he even had in the first part of the season while playing with Carolina, to the point that, of course, Curtis McElhinney was getting the majority of the starts. But lately, Mrazek has been on a great run, and McElhinney has not. Right? McElhinney's last game was really good. He stopped 35 of 37. But before that, that was the game he gave up 8 goals against Winnipeg. He stopped 21 of 29. And then the game before that, he gave up 4 goals on 38 shots to Boston for an overtime loss, which like is still okay, but it's not impermeable in terms of, you know, him really getting a stranglehold on the crease. So I expect Mrazek, like, I think it's a reasonable thought that Mrazek is going to play at least half the games going forward with a shot at 2/3, although you could probably say the same thing about McElhinney.
Okay, I think Mrazek is the guy now. Like, until he blows it, I think Mrazek's going to get more starts moving forward, and I think I'll agree with you. I'll rank him ahead of those guys. Montembeault's gotten through the first period, no other goals against Anaheim, but I'll stop bringing him up. Maybe I'll bring him up one more time at the end of the show. Brian, let's end with some injuries and outros. Usually we start with them. Let's do quick hits on some injuries and outros right at the end. We got to mention that David Perron finally returned to the Blues yesterday, jumped right onto the top line with Ryan O'Reilly and Schenn, and also onto the top power play. Of course, Tarasenko was out, which is why there's this open spot on the top line. Perron also assisted on a Vince Perron assisted on a Vince Dunn goal in the 5-1 rout of the Penguins yesterday. And then he had another great game today. He scored a goal and took 5 shots in the 4-3 shootout loss to Buffalo. By the way, yesterday, Binnington stopped 40-41 and had a good game. Today, Jake Allen was okay, 31 out of 34. I don't want to get into the whole St. Louis goalie situation again. Looks like we're still, I don't know, pretty much up in the air. But as far as David Perron goes, he's a guy you used to be skeptical of. But at this point, I feel like he's got to be a must-add, like well above of Rupe Hintz, right? At least until Tarasenko is back. He's got 18 points in his last 15 games. Fantastic. He'll also be like a fun guy to discuss over the summer because he's on a 65-point pace this season and rising, right? He was slow at first, but he's been so great lately. Last season, as we know, he had that 77-point pace with Vegas. He had 66 points in 70 games. So David Perron, rest of the season, if he's out there in free agency playing on the top line with O'Reilly and Shen, please don't tell me that you're going to say that you don't think he could do well there.
Yeah, absolutely. I love him on that top line. It makes up for the fact that he has been, in my opinion, extremely fortunate with his point production so far this year. I own him in the Cupful, and he was injured during crucial matchups, and that was really unfortunate. I missed him, but I was also really trying hard to sell high on him at one point because I went back and I manually counted. This is just before he got injured back in mid-January. Every goal scored while Perron was on the ice since December 22nd, a span of 16 games, Perron had a point on. He had a 100% IPP for almost a month, 17 points over 16 games on 17 goals scored while he was on the ice. He also had a 12% on-ice shooting percentage at the time. So this run is, in my opinion, not what David Perron is capable of. It's great. He's doing a wonderful job of somehow hitting the score sheet every single night. But I mean, obviously, David Perron is not somebody who is going to keep scoring for another 14-game point streak. But I also wonder, like, he seems more like you're going to hate me for saying this, but like a 2 points every 3 games sort of guy, rather than a point per game player. Of course, if he's playing with Shannon O'Reilly in St. Louis, that is a fantastic place for him to keep getting production just by virtue of playing with some really great players. And he's also pretty good himself. I'm trying to not take him down entirely, but I do really want to make the point that he has been very fortunate. 2 of the big flags of variance that we look at when we're trying to say whether a player's production is sustainable is we look at their IPP and we look at their on-ice shooting percentage. And for Perron during this run, both have been sky high.
Okay, so I think it's more of a note like for projecting for next year, right? Deciding where to draft him, because also Tarasenko will be back next season, hopefully also this season at some point. But yeah, for now, you got to add him on. He's on the top line, top power play, and percentages be damned, right? Okay. Let's move on now to, actually, Brian, I didn't have this in the notes, but I did want to bring up Pittsburgh really quickly because I saw that this guy Teddy Bluger, just scored a goal for Pittsburgh. And the reason why he did so, and it's assisted by Phil Kessel, looks like he's playing on a line with Kessel and Brian Rust because Evgeny Malkin is hurt, so hopefully it's just a one-game thing, but you never know with a Malkin injury. And by the way, Brian Rust is back, so it's an injury situation right now in Pittsburgh, and I guess Teddy Bluger might be the beneficiary playing with Phil Kessel and Rust. I don't know, just really quickly, like, who is Teddy Bluger? Am I pronouncing his name right? And he scored a goal today. Do you expect him to score any more goals if Malkin is out?
Well, I mean, it's one thing to be playing on Malkin's line with Malkin. It's another to be taking his spot on Malkin's line. And you have to think that maybe there's going to be a line shuffle. Like if the Penguins know Malkin, I don't know. I don't want to get too into it, but if you're wondering who he is, he's Latvian, picked in the second round, 52nd overall by Pittsburgh back in 2012. He's 24 years old, and he's had a pretty good season in the AHL this year. His best as a pro. This is his third full pro season, and he had 39 points, 21 of them goals in 45 games before being called up to the Penguins, in which he's played a minor role and had 6 points in 18 games in that role. So keep an eye on the lines. We'll see if Teddy Bluger has a whole lot to offer.
Yeah, and also Jared McCann has stuck on the top line for another week. Hasn't been as exciting of a week this week as it was last week, so we'll see how long that lasts. Also, Chris Letang, they teased that he was practicing with the team, and he may even be back this weekend for the 2 games. He wasn't, but who knows? Maybe next week. So that's obviously great news if you're a Letang owner, and maybe bad news if you're a Justin Schultz owner. You might have to look elsewhere for your top power play production if Letang finally returns. Of course, we'll have to see what else will happen with Malkin. So Pittsburgh, always a frustrating team with injuries, and it's too bad for them that they're getting these right before the actual NHL playoffs. Another team with a big defense injury, Thomas Chabot, is week to week on the Sens with a broken toe. He had already been so cold, so I feel like his fantasy owners shouldn't be too upset. Like, there were a couple of people who post on Facebook like, oh no, more bad luck for me, Thomas Chabot is injured, bah. But it's like, come on, you probably should have considered dropping him anyway. So obviously I feel bad for Chabot having a broken toe, but for his fantasy owners, like, at least now you don't have to struggle with the decision of whether to keep him or not. You could throw him in your IR or drop him and move on, because he had been looking like a snoozer for a while. It's so crazy. This Sens team, like, minus Thomas Chabot, still destroyed the Leafs yesterday. I don't know how they did it. Let me throw out a couple names at you that might be worth considering, just because I guess we have to. There's an injury, so usually I talk about some players on this team. The guy taking over on the top power play is Christian Wolanin, who I believe we talked about before when Chabot missed a couple of games. So he's back there on PP1. He has points in 2 straight games. So maybe you could do worse than Christian Wolanin if you need a defenseman for next week. That potentially could get you a power play point. Ottawa plays Wednesday, Thursday, Saturday, and it's on a Western road trip against Vancouver, Calgary, and Edmonton. So you could wait till Wednesday and then get 3 games in 4 nights. That might not be so bad if you want to get defenseman Christian Wolanin. Another guy that I'll bring up, patron Matthew asked us to talk about a guy named Max Verano. Probably Max Verano. I'm going to go with that. Verano. He has joined the team recently, and he went right to play with, I think, the top line, Brady Tkachuk and JP Pageau yesterday, and he had an assist yesterday, and he also has 7 shots in 2 games. So maybe you could tell us who this guy is, and if he's someone also to maybe consider adding for that 3 games in 4 days next week.
So you're asking me if we should add either of these 2 Ottawa Senators players?
Yeah, I mean, or at least you can tell me if you have any thoughts about them worth sharing, or if you're just going to say yawn and move on. Like, Wolanin, like I said, top power play, and Verano playing on a good line. And I just don't know who he is, so I'm just curious. So is he a guy with offensive pedigree? I don't even know this guy.
So Verano was just a college free agent signing. Somehow the Sens have a pretty good record at landing these guys. I don't know what they tell the college free agents, and I'm not sure if the college free agents follow the NHL. I'm not sure. I guess what they see is a wide open opportunity to contribute. And so Verano can come in and have a somewhat significant role right off the bat. So maybe he likes that. Unfortunately, for anybody looking for fantasy potential, 1, he's on Ottawa, and 2, it's really rare to find that in any of these college free agent signings. Same thing with the guy who just signed with Detroit, whose name is Rufkin. I'm confusing this with a book title I saw recently. So yeah, you know who I'm talking about. That's terrible podcast hosting. Elon, can you find the name? In any case, I'm just saying that these college free agents generally do not pan out offensively. Like, they're good middle 6 players. Look at Jimmy Vesey as one example of someone who was super hyped and just did not turn out to be fantasy relevant, unless, of course, he's paired with someone like Mika Zibanejad, who can pull him up and down the ice and get him points here and there. So that's why I am very cool to Max Verano. And then I'm going to mention Christian Wolanin, and by just saying, if we were talking about dropping Thomas Chabot, because nobody was left in Ottawa, then I'm not that interested in Christian Wolanin. Yeah, you could do worse. Like, I'd prefer Wolanin to Orlov and maybe even to Brett Pesce, but not a whole lot of players I would like ahead, like that I would like Wolanin more than. And by the way, since we're mentioning him, it's his birthday, not when you're listening to this, but on Sunday, March 17th. So happy birthday, Christian Wolanin.
Yeah, I guess the thing is, of course, we were saying to drop Thomas Chabot as like a main guy to hold on your roster. But if Chabot had been dropped and then Ottawa was playing Wednesday, Thursday, Saturday, I might have suggested grabbing him if you had an open D spot for all 3 of those days. So maybe Wolanin could fit that bill. Of course, not a guy you're going to want to depend on rest of the season, but someone to consider if you're in a super deep league. Let's go now. A couple more. Carter Hart is back for Philly. His first game back versus Washington on Thursday didn't go so well. He let in 4 goals out of 31 shots in a loss to the Capitals. He's got another tough game today versus Pittsburgh. Like I said, Teddy Bluger got one past him, but overall, 32 saves on 33 shots so far. We're with 7 minutes left in the third period. So it looks like Carter Hart is having a good game, but unfortunately getting no goal support. Usually Philly's pretty good at scoring goals. So that's bad luck for him. Should we just kind of assume it's going to be 50 until we see otherwise? can I just say it's going to be 50-50 with Carter Hart and Brian Elliott for the rest of the season? Like, Elliott's been pretty solid. He has a 913 save percentage since returning from injury, and that even doesn't really do him justice because that includes that crazy game against the Leafs where he stopped 44 of 51 shots, which sounds really hard. And like, even though that ends up with a bad save percentage, obviously he kept Philly in that game for whatever that's worth. So I don't know. I just feel like Brian Elliott seems solid. Carter Hart is obviously the future. And if I had to guess, I'd say it's just going to be 50-50. I don't see a reason why they're going to start one over the other for a lot of games in a row. So curious if you agree or disagree.
I agree. It's hard to pick the guy who's going to get the ball and run with it. But the good news, if you own either guy, is that they have a pretty good chance of doing all right for a team that has a good chance of giving them enough goal support to win, even if they don't. The Flyers have been on a nice little run. James Van Riemsdyk, I've been playing against the same team for 2 weeks in a row in the Cupful because I played them in the last week of the regular season, and they're my first week playoff matchup. And I lost the first time. I'm going to win this time, but I'm so happy to be moving on from playing. Like, she has the entire Flyers offense. She has Couturier, Van Riemsdyk, and I feel like Claude Giroux, like I can't even, Voracek. I'm tired of looking at them. I'll be so happy to move on. But yes, they are very helpful to whoever their starter is on any given night. So I'd be happy to own either one. Just know that you're unlikely to get a long run of starts with either of them.
Yeah, Brian, you got very lucky for Voracek to be suspended for those 2 games. So that probably helped you in this matchup, in your relegation playoff matchup. You left out that word.
Ouch. I would have won anyway, but it still stings, Elon.
Yeah. So Dylan Larkin returned to the Red Wings yesterday. Didn't do anything. Couple shots. 2-1 win over the Islanders. Brian, you and I in our joint league, we still have Larkin in our IR plus spot. And Detroit plays next week, just Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, at the Rangers, at St. Louis, and at Vegas. So 3 tough road games. Well, maybe the Rangers isn't a tough road game, but 3 road games, and St. Louis and Vegas are both 2 tough teams. Should we be excited to drop someone and get Dylan Larkin back in our lineup? Like, he's obviously had an amazing season. He's at 62 points in 66 games. At the same time, Nyquist is gone. Mike Green is gone for whatever that's worth. These tough 3 road games. Maybe we shouldn't be expecting too much from Dylan Larkin next week. Like, I'm curious to know what you think of him for the rest of the season. He played with Mantha and Helm yesterday, like top line, top power play deployment. But just Detroit is kind of a little bit of a concerning team to me. So I'm just curious to get your take on what you expect from Dylan Larkin.
They are concerning. They're not a team that has had a whole lot of luck scoring goals, and part of that is because they traded away Nyquist just a couple games before Larkin got injured and Mike Green out of the lineup. So now that Larkin's back, we get to see what he can do. I like Anthony Mantha as probably the best fit alongside Larkin of all the remaining Red Wings players. But yeah, you've got to be cautious and know that, hey, maybe, just maybe, he's not going to be able to keep up the incredible pace he was on with the loss of Detroit's most offensive blue liner and this line mate who he's producing really sustainably with. I hope Larkin and Mantha can do some stuff together, but it's not as much of a slam dunk as it was when Nyquist and Green were in the lineup. So I guess that's kind of a hedgy answer. If you've got a full lineup and Larkin is essentially a coin flip difference between him and someone else in like that you're choosing to roster, then of course keep him on the bench. I guess or keep him in your IR. I guess that's an obvious answer. Is there like a player, Elon, on our dynasty team that we need to compare him to decide whether or not to bring him out of IR?
Well, I was thinking of dropping Sam Reinhart, but I know you're super high on him. But we actually are. It's the finals next week, so I think that probably Sam Reinhart is the one who's going to go. And yeah. I don't know.
Yeah, I could see that being really close between the two. I would lean Larkin too, but it's like both guys are in similar positions where they're just potentially in a rut that could last for a large part of the rest of the year.
Yeah, the thing that would frustrate me is if we drop Reinhardt to get Larkin in, then we put Larkin in on Tuesday, and we have to sit someone else to put Larkin even in our lineup. Then the guy who we sit, let's say we sit like Andreas Janssen, we'll probably sit him to play Larkin. And then what if Janssen has a big game and Larkin does nothing? Then the next day Sam Reinhart has a big game, and all of a sudden it's like, damn, I wish we would have just left Larkin in IR. We would have gotten these 2 good games. So it's a bit of a scary situation, but hey, I'm happy to be in the finals. We'll see how it goes.
For the record, Dylan Larkin just with 1 point in 4 games since Nyquist was sent to San Jose, and just 8 shots in those games, which is like, okay, But before that, he was getting like 7 shots, 9 shots. And then, of course, there was some 1, 2, 3 shots game, but several 5-shot, 6-shot games. So it's concerning. Like, you can't just bank on him. It's the same thing with Zach Parise, right? These are guys that you could totally bank on all season long, and then sort of the rug was pulled out from under them, and now it's a question mark of if their production can get back on track. And not having Larkin out of the lineup took some time away from us to try and figure out the answer to that. So the stakes are higher at this point, and that's unfortunate, but I think I'd still trust him a smidge above Sam Reinhart, but I'm still very wary.
Okay, well, we'll talk about it offline and figure out what we want to do with this lineup. It's definitely not a done deal. Let's end the show talking about Marc-Andre Fleury, who just like after I was done prepping, I saw news that he's day-to-day with a lower body injury, which is interesting because that means Malcolm Subban, I guess, becomes the starting goalie on Vegas for however long Fleury is out, and we don't know how long that will be yet, or at least I don't. Subban has not been good this season. Lately, like his last start was on March 10th against Calgary. He let in 5 goals on 34 shots. His previous start was back on February 28th against Florida, and he also let in 5 goals in that game on 37 shots. So it's been a rough go for him, though actually his previous 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 games before that were really good. He had 5 really good games. So I guess Vegas is hoping that Malcolm Subban is going to be able to get back to his, I guess, December, January, February form where he had 5 good games and not this most recent 2 games. Brian, so I guess like we're comparing all of these guys. By the way, we haven't even brought up Anton Khudobin, who I guess if Ben Bishop stays out, Khudobin becomes someone who might be worth owning, and he might still be available in free agency for you. Tough luck, by the way, to Khudobin. 2 losses on Friday and Sunday, even though he played well in both games, but he lost today also in overtime against Vancouver, and I really thought that would be an easy win for Khudobin, but like you said, there's no such thing as an easy win. So, okay, you already had Grubauer ahead of Montembeault, correct? And then you then said, I don't even know where we are. How do you rank Malcolm Subban with these guys? Is he someone that you'd be rushing to add? Doesn't seem like as good a goalie potentially, but he might be on the best team of all of these goalies we've discussed that you might be able to get a starting goalie out of if the starter is actually injured.
I still like Mrazek more.
Yeah, but okay, Mrazek's probably not available. Like to be okay, so I agree with you. Let's say Mrazek is out of the picture, and we're talking about Grubauer versus Malcolm Subban, or I guess Khudobin. Who would you take of those 3?
I don't know. The thing with Subban is he's like obviously on the best team of the bunch, but he plays the least of the bunch, and he's probably the least reliable of the bunch on his career. Like the last 2 years in Vegas, he has a quality start percentage just barely above 40%. So most of the time you can expect he'll blow up your numbers. And like he's 4-7 so far this year. So I don't know. It's really tough. I'd like to say Subban, but I think I might lean Grubauer.
Yeah, and if Khudobin's available, I think I might even go him number 1.
Yeah, I will take Khudobin number 1 as well.
We don't know how long Bishop will be out. Apparently Bishop was practicing today, so he might be back even by the next game. And also by the time you listen to this, Malcolm Subban will have played because they're playing actually right as we finish the show. The game is starting between Edmonton and Vegas, so we'll see how badly Connor McDavid hurts our liking of Malcolm Subban. So we'll see how that goes. Brian, that's it. We're done another show. This has been a blast as we are on this fast train, a rocket train towards the end of the season. I think we got 2-3 weeks left. I guess starting next week, we got to start doing our thing where we play sad music and talk about all the teams who lost. So if you have been eliminated from your playoffs, you could tweet at us at Keeping Karlsson. We'll figure something out. We'll tweet something out to let you know how you could let us know about your team. And too bad. But if you're still in it, good luck next week. Hopefully we've given you some good advice, and hopefully you'll be able to find someone that could help take you to the championship, and we'll be with you every week, every Sunday night to try to get you there. So yeah, thanks very much for listening. If you like the show, you heard how reviews on iTunes affect us positively and negatively. So if you really want to make our day, you could give us a 5-star review on iTunes, and we'll really thank you for it. I wish iTunes had a way where I could like respond and be like, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I do it to every single one if I could, but I can't, so I won't. Then other things you could do is you could become a patron of Keeping Karlsson. I know it's near the end of the year. Brian, do we want to, I guess we could cut this out if you say that you don't want to do this. Do we want to say starting now, you could become a patron for just $1 and get all of the perks?
Starting now or soon? Like it's coming?
Well, I'm promoting it now. Like, so like if I say it starting now, then we might get new patrons who sign up now for $1. But also we might have people who are patrons decrease. But I feel like at this point, I'd rather start it now rather than lose people for good.
Yeah, so can we change that quickly or
Change what?
Change the
No, we
make
don't have
that
to change
available?
it. We'll say like, I'll say it right now. I'll say starting now, if you sign up, we're going to invite you to the Facebook group. We're going to give you access to all future patrons. Because when I make a patron cast, I could just say for all patrons instead of for $5
Oh,
patrons.
I see. Okay.
I could show notes I could give to everybody.
Okay, so yeah, if you have a way to action it, then by all means.
Okay, so I'm going to say, all right. Of course, another way to support the show, you could become a patron of Keeping Karlsson. And special news for you right now. Both this is news for existing patrons and potential wannabe patrons. Starting now, $1. All you have to do is give us $1 per month, and we'll give you access to all of the patron perks we have available. This will be good all throughout the summer. So you'll get our access to our Facebook group, which is very busy over the summer. We're giving a lot of advice, having a lot of fun fantasy talk, trying to prepare for the next season. You'll get our monthly patron cast, which we'll still continue to do over the summer. We actually have a really fun one planned for a couple of months from now, like for the end of April. So I'll leave that a secret for now, but it's going to be a good one. Also, you get our weekly show notes. I don't know. You can check it out, keepingkarlsson.com/patron. Ignore everything you see on the site about needing to pay $5. Starting now, $1. You get everything, and that's also for existing patrons. Feel free to go and decrease your pledge to $1 right now, and you'll continue to get all of the perks moving forward. I hope you'll stick with us over the summer because we hope to have another great season of Keeping Karlsson next season. And I hope that you've found value in the perks that we've given you in exchange for your support. With that, Brian, let's cue the outro music. And why don't you go ahead and read us the credits?
All right. This episode of the Keeping Karlsson Fantasy Hockey Podcast was presented by Dobber Hockey and powered by our patrons. It was researched with help from Dobber Hockey, Frozen Pool, Dobber Prospects, Natural Stat Trick, Evolving Hockey, Charting Hockey, Cap Friendly, Hockey Goalies, Hockey Reference, Hockey Viz, Hockey Database, Elite Prospects, Roto World, and Yahoo!
Great job as always, Brian. This has been so much fun. Good luck to us in our joint league where we're going to the finals next week. So next week, you guys will hear if we're happy or sad that we won that matchup. Good luck again to everyone. And we will catch you all with another live episode next week. So that's Sunday, 8 p.m. You can join us, keepingkarlsson.com/live, or you'll get the show in your feed on Monday or Sunday night as per usual. Bye-bye.
Yeah. And also keep on keeping Karlsson. You should do that too.
Even if he's injured, do you think he's going to come back and play he might play a regular season game, right?
I feel like he needs to at least tune up for the playoffs.
I think I also saw that Taylor Hall might get in for a regular season game. So it might be interesting, like in the last week of the season, you might want to grab a couple of these guys out of free agency if they've been dropped. You get like all-star players to help you if your league goes to the end of the week. But the show's done. So we'll continue this conversation next week. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Cool. Okay, so thanks. Oh, Dadonov scored again. What a hero. See, Brian, that's why you gotta love Sam Montembeault, because he's got Evgeny Dadonov giving him the goal support.
Yeah, you were right. I was wrong.
What a hero. I love Dadonov. Like, even when he goes slow, it's just great because it just gives us an opportunity to answer when people ask, should I drop Dadonov, to say no. And then afterwards, like, oh, thank you so much for telling me not to drop Dadonov. You're so smart. And it's like, no problem, man. It's like, it's the easiest job. He's great. So good. All right. What is he up to? 57 points. Yeah, he's having not even the best season, but he's still amazing. I still love him. I don't care. I guess you probably want to go. Well, okay, let's go. Let's both go. So,
All right.
Bye, pal. Thanks, everyone, for joining us. Bye-bye.
Yeah, thanks, chat.
Brian's tired.
I'm so tired. But good job, everyone. I hope it didn't show too much.
You did great. I'll edit out all the tired parts.
Oh, thanks.
I don't know how to do that, but I'll try. That would be a cool filter on Audacity. If I know,
an awoken filter.
Just give you like more energy. Just inject energy into your voice. So that's probably possible. Okay. Bye.
Okay. Bye. Good job.